Coming up next, The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy. Every Thursday from 4 p.m, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
People are struggling to have conversations and connect with others that they don't completely agree with on every topic. And I think that's probably the biggest problem that we need to try and solve, is how after all this division and after all this separation do we end up bringing people together again, and what does unity really look like?
New Zealand faces some pretty big issues. First one is COVID and the aftermath. There's no getting away from that. Second is racial division. It's been ginned up and it's dangerous. Another issue that maybe people haven't got their head around yet is digital currency. What form does that take? Is it programmable? Will it be used to manipulate behaviour and patterns of behaviour? Those questions need to be asked and answered.
How can you have fair, open, democratic government by people who are appointed? It's a ridiculous idea. And if that idea is taken to its zenith, then this country is in real trouble, because democracy, one person, one vote, where every vote is of equal value, has got to be the foundation of a modern New Zealand.
What's true, what's not true, how our kids are to be educated. And, I have a great fear for the future. I think we know from history where this could end up.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.
Welcome to The Crunch on Reality Check Radio. I'm your host, Cam Slater, and this is the place we crunch the political issues and cut through all the politicians' spin. Last week I mentioned those who sacrificed their lives to fight totalitarianism, and this week we see Justin Trudeau introducing a censorship bill, and the WHO and Joe Biden talking about the need to fight mis- and disinformation. Our freedoms are constantly under attack, but only if we let them. One of my guests today is Senator Malcolm Roberts from Australia, and he's been at the forefront in the fight against the globalist agenda. And I'll have a chat to Liam Hehir about his contrarian views about the Maori Parliament proposed by Te Pāti Māori, as well as talking about the very reluctant Chloe Swarbrick. Naturally, we'll hear from Cam's buddies and see what they have to say about their thoughts on the announcement of 12 government agencies having an inquiry into the shenanigans at Manurewa Marae. And of course, we'll have the whale bag to get your feedback too. Don't forget to send comments to inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057. Today, we dive into a topic that strikes at the very heart of our freedoms: censorship. Last week, I talked about the sacrifices of soldiers on D-Day, fighting to free Europe from the totalitarianism of Nazi Germany. And this week, we see the new fascists are trying very hard to censor us. But this isn't just about someone telling you what you can or can't say. This is about a sophisticated, insidious campaign dressed up in the noble-sounding cause of protecting us from misinformation and disinformation. But make no mistake, this is a Trojan horse for a globalist agenda that seeks to undermine our democratic values and strip us of our rights, particularly our cherished right to free speech. Let's take a look at some recent examples. In Australia, the e-safety commissioner is trying to force Elon Musk's platform X into a worldwide ban over an event that took place in Australia. This overreach is staggering. They claim it's about safety, but it's really about control. Only dictators seek to restrict what their citizens can say and do. If they can censor this, what's next? political opinions, dissenting voices, historical facts that don't fit their narrative. In Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is pushing an online censorship bill under the guise of protecting people from misinformation. Trudeau argues that this will safeguard citizens, but what it actually does is empower the government to decide what is true and what isn't. This is the very definition of authoritarianism. It's not about truth, it's about power. It's Orwellian. George Orwell wrote 1984 as a warning, not as a guidebook. Similarly, organizations like the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization are notorious for their draconian stances. They have positioned themselves as the arbiters of truth on the global stage. And through initiatives like the Christchurch Call, they aim to clamp down on what they term extremist content. But who defines what is extremist? Often it's anything that goes against their agenda. The Labour Party in Australia, much like its counterparts worldwide, is on board with these measures. Under the banner of combating misinformation, they push for policies that stifle free speech. It's a slippery slope. Once we allow them to censor one type of content, it becomes easier for them to censor others. And let's not forget the underlying hypocrisy of this. These same entities who now claim to be our protectors are often the ones who spread misinformation. We've seen it time and again during the pandemic, where guidelines and statements from these organisations changed more frequently than the weather. And yet they face no consequences for their own misinformation. Instead, they double down, demanding we trust them implicitly while they silence any questioning voices. We must remember that free speech is a cornerstone of Western values. It's what allows for open debate, the exchange of ideas, and the ability to challenge authority. And when we lose our ability to speak freely, we lose our ability to think freely. And when we lose our ability to think freely, democracy itself is in peril. This globalist agenda, whether it comes from the WEF or the WHO or our own government, is a direct threat to our freedoms. They want to control the narrative and by doing so, control us. We must resist this Trojan horse of misinformation and disinformation. It's a smokescreen for a much more sinister agenda, one that is anti-democratic, authoritarian, and fundamentally opposed to the values we hold dear. So as we move forward, let's remain vigilant. Let's question these so-called protectors and hold them accountable. Our freedom depends on it. Liam Hehir has been on The Crunch before, and recently he's written some pretty good articles on his Substack, The Blue Review. One was about a very reluctant Chloe Swarbrick. It was satirical and quite funny. And another was his belief that a Maori parliament would do no harm. To talk about these and more, Liam joins me now. Welcome back to The Crunch, Liam, here. It's great to have you back, and I want to touch on a couple of things today of some articles you've written on your Substack, The Blue Review. The first one is our little friend Chloe Swarbrick, but welcome back anyway.
Well, thank you for welcoming me, and I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, so Chloe Swarbrick has announced last week, or did another sort of hagiographic interview where she said, oh, look, she's very reluctantly taking up the job as the leader of the Green Party, and echoed her reluctance to being a politician. Now, you've written a satirical piece on this in the Blue Review. What's your views on Chloe Swarbrick and her reluctance?
Well, I'm very reluctant to, share my opinions, as you know, but, destiny has forced me to engage in some punditry on this issue. And so with great reluctance, I'll take up the calling of the times and let you know that I think it's a joke, But funnily enough, Cam, that article I wrote for the Blue Review about the reluctant politician, I wrote that a while ago, right? I think it might have been about 6 or 7 weeks ago at least.
Yes.
Because it was the last time that had emerged, and it got a bit of attention. It was read quite well. The numbers were all right, and so sometimes when you puncture an image like that, the result is that the media backs off it, but they've only doubled down. I couldn't believe it that once again we would have this article or this podcast on stuff where the theme of the whole thing was. This is the person who never wanted to be a politician, despite the fact she spent almost the great majority of her adult life anyway, either running for office or holding office or seeking office. It's you can understand about politicians wanting to project a mythical image about themselves. You would think that the journalist class who so often hold themselves out as the people who puncture these narratives, they just go along with it, and that's the biggest joke of all.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? With all of the problems that there are in the media environment, where trust is falling, you've got all the media who are losing jobs saying, "But who's going to hold the powerful to account?" Well, it's not them. So you've got somebody here who will be a minister in a Labour Green government. Somebody who has created this fantasy that they're very reluctant about everything they do. And the media doesn't puncture that. As you say, the media doesn't skewer her and say, well, come on now, hang on a second.
The issue is how partial it is, right? I mean, for whatever reason, and the thing is, I've met Chloe Schwarbrick a couple of times. I actually found her really, delightful to have a conversation with. I think that's true of a lot of politicians, to be honest with you. But, when it comes to people like Christopher Luxon, I guess, people will quite rightly and happily try to puncture the narrative he tries to put about himself. If he talks about being this experienced businessman who ran an airline, that quickly becomes a meme, against him, and rightly so. And the same went for, Chippy from the Hut,
And John Key, of course, being the money trader, they dug into that. The Labour Party actually spent vast sums of money trying to get John Key on the so-called H fee. But
for whatever reason, that narrative is just accepted, and not only accepted but amplified. And it is, I wouldn't say it's frustrating. It's funny. I think it's funny because I think most people see through it. I mean, most people would see someone who's in their 20s or has been a politician throughout their 20s, claiming to be a reluctant politician. And most people just laugh at that. And it's only the people who are sort of propagating that narrative in a self-unaware way that are doing the real disservice to themselves.
I mean, when she ran for the Auckland mayoralty, she was 22. She's now 30.
And she did a great job, right? She came third. Good on her, I suppose. Personally, I think that career politicians we criticise all the time. Sometimes career politicians turn out to be good politicians. Winston Churchill was a career politician, right? Not that I'm comparing them.
Was he reluctant? He was pretty reluctant too.
Yeah, well, he would. I suppose he might say so, but like Schwarbrick, he spent his whole time in and around politics, his whole adult life. So it's just own who you are. I would say own who you are, own that you're an ambitious person who wants to be at the top of things, wants to tell people what to do with their lives, and I might not agree with that, but at least you could respect it a bit more.
I mean, I've been involved in politics for almost all of my life, in and around politicians, and I could be sort of conservative and say for 40 years, and I'm 55. But it's probably longer than that. And I have a very cynical view of politicians. In my view, the majority of them are sociopaths. They certainly have narcissistic personality disorder, and they don't enter this thing called politics reluctantly, ever.
I think you're right. I mean, okay, I'm not sure if you're right on a diagnosis, because I hope to say I'm just a humble jobbing provincial lawyer. I can't medically diagnose people, but I don't think something that I've always felt is that anyone who gets into politics, anyone who puts their hand up for elected office, they see themselves as being in the big chair, right?
You're right. They all think they're the next prime minister.
I know. And I remember when David Cunliffe was asked, before he became the leader, would you want to be prime minister? Oh, no. It'd be a horrible job. Can you imagine? Oh man, I could never see myself having to go through all that. And it's just so fake. It's they all do. Even the lowliest list MP, even the lowliest backbench MP, they dream that one day circumstances might just deliver them to the big seat. They can all see themselves as prime minister. I remember Peter Dunn when he was the, after the 2002 election, when United Future had the big surge to 6%.
Because of a worm.
And he did an interview where he said, I can see a path, the National Party is in decline. I can see a path for New Zealand United Future to come through the middle, and I could end up being the prime minister, and it just went to show that yes, they all have those delusions of power and grandeur. Every single one of them, and I'm friends with them. That's why some of them are my mates, and that's okay. But there's something wrong with you that makes you want to run for office, and it's none of them are low on ambition.
No, I mean it rather begs the question of why no one in the media does a Nelson Muntz when they make these claims, and just sit there and go ha ha, because that's how credible their claims are.
Yeah, I mean, just own it. I say. I mean, you and I, we're hardly perfect, and we wouldn't do commentary, and we wouldn't get involved in political controversies if we ourselves weren't, didn't sort of have a kind of an ambitious streak or a desire to be in amongst it and to make a difference. And there's a certain vanity to that, right? I just think you should own it. You should just accept that that's part of who you are, and not try to pretend to be something you're not.
I mean, are we going to see Chloe Swarbrick continue to make this claim that she's a reluctant politician, that she reluctantly is leading the Green Party? I can just imagine after the next election, God forbid, that the Greens are in a position to negotiate with Labour. And I could just imagine her on election up. Well, reluctantly, I guess we're going to have to talk to the Labour Party.
Yeah. There's no doubt that narrative will continue because it's not getting any pushback, right? Like, why would you, as a politician, confront a more unappealing reality if the media was going to not only allow you to push a different narrative, but actually support it and propagate it? So, of course, until the day comes that people start laughing about it in the media, it'll continue. And that's the thing, Cam, is that the one thing that destroys any type of pretension is being laughed at. And
howls of derisive laughter, as they said in Monty Python. Howls of derisive laughter.
It's the great leveler.
Yeah. But I can still see it. I can picture it now. They sign a coalition agreement. Chloe Swarbrick stands up and says, well, the voters have chosen, and reluctantly we've had our hand forced, and we're going to be forming a government with the Labour Party, and reluctantly I'll be Deputy Prime Minister. Just go on and on.
Or reluctantly I'll be the Minister of Statistics, because that's what I really got into politics to do, to get a limousine for having a low priority, low influence ministerial sinecure. That's what always frustrates me about little parties is, they campaign on these big ideas and then they become Minister of Consumer Affairs or something.
Is it just little parties that the media fail to account, or is it just certain kinds of parties? Because we see the Green Party, and I mean, there's still got this ongoing investigation into Darlene Tana. It's been 90 odd days on a fairly straightforward investigation. There's no real credible media questioning of that. You've got Te Pāti Māori who make appallingly racist comments about everybody other than Maori, and then there's also their attacks on the wrong kind of Maori is the way they look on it. But the media says nothing about that, yet Shane Jones says something and all of a sudden it's a major scandal, and New Zealand First are demons personified. Christopher Luxon makes a mistake on something, the media attack on that. You just don't see the same sort of scrutiny of particularly the Green Party, who always sort of cower behind the shield of sanctimony and the cloak of hypocrisy. And the Maori Party are exactly in the same position. It's like they're the media darlings, and we'll just ignore all of their foibles, false steps, and outright disastrous type policies and statements.
But what about the Uffindell report? That's what everyone would say in response to that. Like it's just look.
Well, at least we've had the Uffindell report,
It was done inside, in 2 months it was done.
He was a kid.
The thing is, the point I made the other day was that the Challenger shuttle inquiry, when the Challenger space shuttle blew up, that was done inside, I think, 100 days or 105 days. And the Darlene it was to work out why a space shuttle exploded, killing all those people.
Yeah.
The Darlene Tana report is going to blow past that time frame to find out whether or not someone paid an employee or not. But look, the thing is, I think that the points you make are essentially accurate. I think that the Green Party did used to be treated as a party with a lot more there was much more of a kid glove approach than there is now. I think that it's come in a little bit. And I remember when Materia Ture confessed to that she had wrongfully claimed the benefit, right, or something like that. There was can't quite remember what it was, but it was a benefit incorrectly, fraudulently claiming a benefit.
It was benefit fraud. Let's just state it what it was.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and so there was a media interview about. So at first, the media sort of rallied around her, and it was going to be this big moment, and the public really hated it. The public hates anything like that, and there was a disconnect between the media and the public, and so eventually the narrative turned on it a little bit. And I think it might have been Audrey Young wrote a column about how, maybe it might not have been Audrey Young, so don't I'm not going to back up on that, but someone wrote a column about how the Green Party were just sort of really, the staffers were blindsided by the fact that the media had started to ask them hard questions or weren't being as friendly. And they had sort of had this entitlement mentality that they would always be sort of treated with a sort of a friendly way. And so I think, that the gloves came off a little bit for that. And then we had the green school fiasco. Remember that all that money that went to this for rich kids and in a fancy private school. It was called the Green School.
Yep.
And so, while I think Schwarbrick has recaptured a bit of that, that sort of old, unadulterated, just glorious cover, I think that the Greens, while they get off easy, still they don't get off quite as easy as TPM. And Te Pāti Māori, I've just been astonished over the last couple of years as that party's evolved into quite an extremist party that says extremist things that would get any other political any other MP who said those things, accusing the government of the day of genocide and things like that, they would be hounded out of politics.
Well, you can remember when David Seymour made a quip about Guido Fawkes being the only person who ever entered Parliament with honourable intentions, and talked about him going into some government departments. The media was screaming, David Seymour wants to blow up this ministry.
That's right.
And yet we've got multiple Maori Party MPs that are saying out loud that it's time for a revolution. Now, no revolution happens anywhere in the world without bloodshed.
Yeah, well, I think personally revolution, I think you can say is a metaphor. What's not a metaphor is saying that the government is exterminating Māori. And do you remember when Tariana Turia, do you remember when she compared the Parihaka to the Holocaust or something? Yeah. And it was sort of in the early Clark government. And there was this huge hullabaloo about it, and Clark made Turia apologise, and it wasn't a real apology, but it was this big pushback on it because it was an extremely insulting and wrong thing to say. And yet here we have multiple instances of a political party saying that about the existing government, and when they're confronted on it, they double down. And whenever it's reported in the media, there's always been this contextualizing of it, right? Like it's never reported straight. It's always reported with a kind of a justification to it. And, but it also comes down to things like, the Māori Party's economic policy, right? They released the economic manifesto. It was insane. Like it had this insane wealth tax that would just impoverish the country. It was almost like a Robert Mugabe type economic policy.
No questioning at all.
No questioning of it. Or when it was questioned, there'd be one question and it'd be sort of laughed off, and then there was never a follow-up question, right? And that's what's always been a little bit frustrating to me about TPM is that sometimes the media will ask questions, but they'll never ask the hard follow-up questions. They'll always let MPs from that party off the hook. And it's just, and I've always wondered what it was. I think part of it's fear, right? Part of it's fear of being accused of being racist. Not wanting to incite a backlash or a counterattack. But now that the story can't be ignored, and we actually had some pretty good journalism from the likes of Andrea Vance on it. What we're seeing is that all of a sudden the Māori Party is struggling because for so long they've been pushing on an open door, right? For so long, bad behaviour has been either ignored or rewarded. And now that the story, I think that sort of bad behaviour is habit forming, right? And now that they're in the habit of it and it can't be ignored anymore, I think finally we're going to start to see some pushback. And it's a start, but hopefully it goes further and we actually start to have a bit more confrontation against TPM in terms of the zany, off the wall, but frankly dangerous things that they say.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I've raised the issue of them using imagery of, I know they're flintlock pistols, but it's the imagery of guns nonetheless.
Yeah.
And burning in the background and videos with ominous music and war drums beating and that sort of thing, along with a message that says revolution, that we can do what we want. We can remove any government that we don't like. Yeah, that sort of rhetoric. There's some people who on my own website say, "Oh, we should just ignore them. They're just rowdies." Well, that's what they said about a little Austrian fellow who wasn't a very good painter and had a silly moustache. We'll just ignore them. But exactly the same situation kind of exists. You had Adolf Hitler, who had this little gang of thugs who bullied, beat, broke, smashed their way into power. Yeah. And we've got Te Pāti Māori with this rhetoric that's being also echoed by, ironically, the stormtroopers of the mongrel mob who talk about that sort of thing and are closely aligned with many of the gangs in New Zealand who are, you could argue, echo the thuggery and the behaviour that existed back in the 1930s in Germany.
Well, they even use the same swastikas, all right?
Well, they do.
There we go.
And they even used the Zig Heil chant and bark like dogs.
Just like John Tamahiri.
Yeah.
Look, the thing is, I guess, yes, I think there is always a danger of saying, right, well, we didn't. It's like that movie Conan the Barbarian. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
Just a few years ago, they were just another snake cult, and it's true, like small problems can become big problems just, if you don't squash them. I guess that I'm probably a little bit less fearful of it to an extent because I think that, in Germany after the First World War, you had, a country that didn't have a democratic tradition, didn't have a liberal tradition. And, the country had just been defeated in a massive war and they were turning to, someone who was promising to, make the country rise from the ashes. And, of course, also was appealing from a majority position against minorities. Not that I'm saying it makes it any better. I'm just saying that it's a bit more, you have a bit more to fear in that scenario than you do when I think the when TPM has quite an inbuilt limited audience. And the point I would just try to make, and this is the point I tried to make about my Māori Parliament thing that just got me got me so rinsed by the right, was that Te Pāti Māori doesn't win a lot of votes. They ran about 100,000 votes in the last election. The rhetoric has a lot of purchase with the universities, the public sector maybe, and the media. Those are all institutions, sort of liberal institutions that are dominated by liberals that are in decline and who are less and less trusted by the majority population. And I think that the conflation of TPM with Māoridom is just wrong. I mean, this cabinet is 40% people of Māori descent, right? And so
they're not the right kind of Maori, though. That's what they say. Basically, that when you read between the lines and what Te Pāti Māori says, is they ignore that, and they basically are saying they're the wrong kind of Maori. We saw that the shameless attack on Karen Shaw, wrong kind of Maori. David Seymour, he's a white Maori. This sort of behaviour, outright racism, actually.
Imagine saying that about Shane Jones, eh? Imagine saying that Shane Jones, with his life experience, everything he's done, saying that he's somehow not a real Māori person. It's just incredible. But like everyone in this, in this country, we interact with Māori every day. As friends and family, and
we interact with Kiwis every day.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. They're just ordinary people, They're no different than Pākehā, or, we just get along. And so I think it's really a fictitious thing for the media to make out like in some way Te Pāti Māori is the voice of Māori in this country. It just isn't. It's a small minority. Now, I'm not trying to downplay the fact that it only takes a small number of radicals to make big problems. That's absolutely true. And if things progress to the point where we start to have real attacks on sort of civil society or an ordered society, then it doesn't take a whole lot of people to create a whole lot of problems. And the government of the day has to be strong and forthright and to apply standards equally to stop that from happening.
I mean, it is a small group, and you could ignore them, except, I received via email the other day, I don't know how I received it. Somehow it's been sent to me for some reason. But this is the kind of wording that is in there. I'll just quote some of it for you. Movements are strengthening in Aotearoa, working to further Tino Rangatiratanga, decolonisation, constitutional transformation, and te tiriti justice. That sounds okay at that stage. And it says here, at the same time, our present coalition government and its outright attack on a te tiriti-based Aotearoa are emboldening racists and reactionaries. Challenging this backlash and anti-Maori racism as part of the ecosystem and creating a te tiriti-based future, and all tangata tiriti have a responsibility and role to play. And then they go on and say, some of you may recall that Tauiwi Tautoko began as Action Station initiative and that we continue to support this kaupo. Tauiwi Tautoko is now its own charitable. Now, they use the word Tauiwi, right, which they say that means non-Maori. It actually means a foreigner or even worse, a settler. And it goes on and on. It says, talking about they want to transform by challenging anti-Maori racism from within Tauiwi communities. So they're saying within foreign communities. So they're talking about communities that exist within New Zealand, of New Zealanders, of Kiwis, of voters, and calling them foreigners.
Who is this from? Who did this come from?
Well, I haven't. It's that bit's been trimmed off.
Okay.
But no, here we go. It's and for the Action Station and Tauiwi Tautoko team. So Action Station's a hard left bunch of activists that are pushing this narrative.
Yeah. So Action Stations are sort of like the Atlas Network, except for the media never covers it like that.
When someone says Atlas Network, I just imagine myself as Homer Simpson in the Simpsons movie where he backs into the hedge out of the way. It's like, okay, you went there. You went Atlas Network. Okay.
So people can say what they want, right? I mean, like,
Oh, sure.
my family's came to this country in 1842. All right, it's the only country don't have citizenship of anywhere else. You know, our family's lived in the same district since 1870s. I'm not a foreigner to this country. This is the only country I have. It's my home, and you know, people can say what they want. I don't care. You know, this is my home, and at the same time, I guess it comes down to that freedom of speech thing, and we just have to trust, I suppose, that for most people, that kind of thinking is a real turn-off. It's alienating. It doesn't have a lot of support, and the trick is to make sure that it doesn't worm its way into official policy through the non-democratic means, you know, through the public sector, through universities.
By osmosis.
By osmosis, yeah. Because you know, that's just and to accuse me of being a settler or you being a settler, we grew up here, you know, that most people would see that for what it is, which is just insulting and ridiculous.
Oh, I get it on X all the time. Someone says, "Oh, you're a racist," and I always reply, "No, I'm a Fijian."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're not a real Fijian though, Cameron, because you know, like, you're not left wing, right? So that means you can't possibly be a person of colour.
Well, you know, I was born in Fiji. I've got a Fijian birth certificate. I'm Fijian, right? I had to take New Zealand citizenship by descent, right? Not as of right, by descent. I remember getting my first passport, and I had to get it by descent.
Yeah.
So I mean, you could say I'm Tauiwi,
like the great African American Elon Musk.
Oh yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's the thing. You wrote that article on the Blue Review, but you're basically saying Maori want a Maori parliament. So what? Yeah,
I mean, look, despite everything I've just said, you know, it's this country. We did have a treaty, right? And so there was the crown still exists. It's the same crown. Iwi still exists. It's the same Iwi. It's not the same as every other ethnicity. There is a difference, and you know, it's hard to give effect to that because, you know, when the treaty was signed, you know, iwi, you know, they genuinely had control of their own territory, and that's gone away. There's no territorial basis for any kind of autonomy anymore. But if people want to get together and say, look, you know, we've got a common heritage, we've got a common ancestry, we've got a common culture, we want to promote that, we want to try and have as much self-determination as we can, that's just freedom of expression and assembly to me. We cross the line if you advocate for, you definitely cross the line if you advocate for overthrowing the government or disobeying the government's laws, and maybe that will come, and that would be something to crack down on severely. But something I always think about, Cam, and you might think this is weird, is, you know, I come from a culture that's a, you know, Irish Catholic culture. We had 1,000 years of that being handed down in our family down to me. I want to be able to raise my kids in our family religion. I want them to have our family values, and I want them to pass it on to their own children. Now, there are lots of people in the New Zealand state, or people involved in politics, who hate those values and think that those values are outdated and wrong and medieval.
And should be secondary to Maori culture and values, whatever those are. But
even just secular culture, values and culture, right? And you know that and so because I want the freedom to be able to hand on that culture, right, and to be able to hand it on to my own children and to raise my children the way I want, I kind of just have a sympathy against sort of the homogenization of everything and everything having to be run like Wellington liberals want. And so I have an innate sympathy for people who want to preserve their own patrimony. And I think, you know, as long as it doesn't cross the line into actually advocating sedition or rebellion, and, you know, maybe the case can be made that that's already happened, but personally just haven't quite seen it yet. Until that happens, it just reminds me of some of the Māori parliaments that we've had in the past, right? Where it was an advocacy body. There were two houses gathered to pass resolutions and to liaise with the government and make recommendations to the government and talk to the government. And even had prime ministers like Richard Seddon go along and observe. it wasn't a threat because it wasn't something that was intended to supplant the law of the land, right? And so, and that's the only point I was trying to make.
But here's an interesting point, though. That's fine. I agree with you. I want to do the same thing with my family, with my children, my grandchildren, all of those sorts of things. I want to pass on that my own Christian faith in that regard. But I don't expect anybody to pay for that other than myself.
No, that's true.
Right? And this is where, we have the grandstanding of Te Pāti Māori, Rawiri Waititi, saying that he's declaring independence from Parliament. Well, he hasn't resigned from Parliament, so he's not independent of Parliament because he's still getting his salary.
Yeah.
And it's grandstanding, but the expectation that they'll say that, well, Article 3 of the treaty says that you'll pay for it, Whitey.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what. Look, that's not independence for one thing. You're quite right. And the Katahi, I think it was called the Katahi-Hatanga, which was the Māori Parliament in the 19th century. That wasn't a state-supported thing. You did have people who were members of both. That's because it wasn't seen as being inconsistent. And if TPM or its outspoken leadership was to say that they're wanting to supplant the New Zealand Parliament or replace it, then I would completely agree with you, and that would be a completely hypocritical act on their part.
Or worse, establish a parallel system of government where our existing Parliament has to consult with and get approval from the Maori Parliament, because I see that as an interim step that they would want to push, part of the partnership, as part of that this lie that they never ceded sovereignty. I interviewed Catherine Ennis Carter last week, and she said, in the 70s and early 80s, the predominant argument from Maori about the treaty was that they was duped. That it was a fraud, that they were tricked, and as a result, impoverished because of that. And of course, that's now morphed in the 90s and the 2000s, and where we are now, 24 years since the year 2000, into we never ceded sovereignty. You owe us everything, and Article 3 says that you'll pay for it. And that's where we've got to from a document that is a historic fact and is written there in plain language for anyone who cares to know. There's this morphing of the meaning of words to say things that were never said or agreed to.
So my take on all that is a little bit contrarian too. I mean, I've always had, I think, we can argue as a matter of history, about what the treaty was designed for and what it was and how it was received, what was intended by the meaning of it. But it doesn't change the subsequent history, right? And so sovereignty doesn't come from a treaty. Sovereignty comes from legitimate government, right? We don't go back
the formation of a parliament and acts of parliament and acceptance by the majority of the population.
100% right? And so we don't go back and try and undo the Norman conquest on the basis that, that's
the thing. Or the Danegeld area of Britain, when the Vikings conquered 2/3 of the UK.
So the Norman conquest was, William the Conqueror said, look, I've got a claim to the throne of England. It was a dubious claim, but it was a claim, though. It was a claim, but it wasn't the claim that that established his sovereignty. His sovereignty was he actually exercised it, right, and he became the king, and over time that evolved into what we now call the United Kingdom.
Yep.
And it's the same here, right? Whatever the history was, the reality is that we have a sovereign crown. The crown has a democratic element to it, so it's got democratic legitimacy. It's
a constitutional monarchy.
It's the constitutional monarchy. It checks the box in terms of being a efficient, fair, reasonable, and accountable government. To an extent.
We know how Maori see that because they started to set up their own kingitanga movement, and did set up their own kingitanga movement because they thought it was a good idea.
And their own parliament, right, too, right? And attempts to that. Now, the point that I would just make is that, it's interesting and worthy historical inquiry, but it doesn't change the fact that the Crown has got sovereignty. The Crown can't give up that sovereignty because the Crown is democratically accountable to everybody. I mean, I wouldn't, to me, it wouldn't bother me in the slightest, right, if we had a second chamber of Parliament and you said, right, okay, well, look, in fairness, there was clearly some sort of idea that the Rangatira would continue to have some sort of status or authority or some sort of voice distinctive as the basis of being the people who are already here and the people who signed the treaty. And as long as this upper house was a House of Lords type upper house where it was a revising chamber only, it could make suggestions only, kind of like a select committee, and control remained with the democratic elements, it wouldn't bother me in the slightest if you were to have an upper house and you were to say, like the House of Lords, that there is a space for at least some seats to be allocated to the landed gentry or the nobility. In this case, to iwi, right? And that wouldn't bother me in the slightest, just as it wouldn't bother me to be in England in the House of Lords and have some hereditary peers.
Well, other than the fact it goes against the Kiwi ethos of Jack's as good as his master, there's a reason why we don't have an upper house, right?
Yep, I know, right. but I'm just trying to square different things here. And all I'm saying is it wouldn't bother me as long as the control remained with the House of Representatives, like in the UK, right? The House of Lords can be a real pain in the neck, frequently is, to the House of Commons. But there's no doubt that the House of Commons is in charge because the House of Commons is the only body that represents everyone. Same goes for the House of Representatives in New Zealand. That's where its legitimacy comes from. It doesn't come from a piece of paper.
Nor does it come from a improperly stated Declaration of Independence.
No, that's right. And that's the thing. So with the terms of what I was, TPM want to have their own parliament, fine. They can't establish a state in New Zealand. They don't have even the electoral support to really say that they represent Māori. So, good luck, guys. It's on you. We have freedom of assembly. We have freedom of speech. We have freedom of all sorts in this country. If you can, establish that you've got some sort of legitimacy to speak for all Māori, then go for it. But, I'd have to say that your work's cut out for you based on the low level of support that you have amongst the population at large.
It's 3.08%, if you want to be particular about that.
Yeah.
3.8%. They 87,844 votes. And, it's interesting because I looked at the results for the Manurewa electorate because it's pertinent at the moment with these allegations of, impropriety and all sorts of other things. The actual votes that were cast in that electorate were, let's just say scant.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about those electorates is why they're so unpredictable, right? Is that they're set on basis of population, but the turnout's so low that you can have these wild results. Remember Te Tai Tukurau and how easy that one was to influence? Remember that, was there a by-election or wasn't there? Did Kelvin win that in a by-election or what happened? I can't quite remember. You were involved. You did a Operation Chaos type thing, didn't you?
So they say. I can't really remember.
I'm not accusing you of anything, but I remember it was there was a movement to sort of to support Kelvin Davis against Honi Hararira, I think.
Yeah,
from
something
memory.
like that. Yeah,
yeah.
But, the total votes cast in Tamaki Makaurau electorate, 25,000 votes were cast, 25,604. Pene Henare got 10,026 and Takatai Tashkent got 10,068, a margin of just 42.
Yeah.
But those are small numbers.
Yeah, I know. And that's why they're so unpredictable, right? You can easily influence them. Now, a really interesting thing is if you're talking about inconsistencies, do you remember all the times that people were saying about X, sort of distorting Parliament?
Yeah, I just
because of the overhang.
Off. Yeah,
But nobody ever talks about the democratic issues with the overhang, with the strategic voting in the Māori electorates.
I don't think anybody's mentioned the overhang that was created by the Maori Party getting 3% of the votes and getting 7 seats.
Yeah. But when
nobody said it, not even mentioned, is it?
No. And so, you know, if you can imagine if ACT and had a similar sort of thing where they won more electorates consistently than party vote entitlements, there would be calls to reform MMP almost daily. But
well, you see similar complaints too about, they talk about the big money in elections, and ACT has got the big money, and I always just laugh at people who make those claims, because if money bought elections, ACT would be the majority party. They just spend an absolute fortune, right? But they don't get the results. That's because their ideas aren't accepted by the majority of New Zealanders.
Yeah, it's proof that you can't buy elections. It's just
correct.
It is. And in fact, the more that you put out your propaganda, the more widespread it is, the more damage you might even do to yourself if people don't agree with it. Right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And Colin Craig's the other example. He spent something like $5 million and didn't get into Parliament. Thank God. You know, I might have had a hand in that, but
Gareth Morgan,
others. So there's 3 data points that show that money doesn't actually influence elections. It's ideas that influence elections.
Yeah. The other thing I'd say to that, and this is why I think that sort of battles over the National Party, are important, is that, you know, both the National Party and the Labour Party, like they have hundreds, between them, a couple hundred years of history. And that means they've got networks and machinery and institutional knowledge that the other parties just don't have. And I actually think that matters a lot more than people in the media sort of are willing to recognise. It's your ordinary Joes who are, your volunteer networks, people who are going out and dropping leaflets, and that gets you more support than money can. And that's why it was always annoying to me when people would say, we'd like to have a sort of a social conservative party that would just be outside of the National Party providing support to it, and the National Party can continue to be the sort of urban liberal party, the senior partner. And I was like, well, no, you leave, because actually it's not just, the brand or whatever. It's also all of that machinery underneath, all of those networks.
Well, we saw that at the last election. We saw that at the last election too with, Liz Gunn and her New Zealand Loyal Party.
Yep.
If you could call it a party, dictatorship's probably a better word. But this is the problem. I get people all the time, they say to me, Cam, I'd like to, engage you to look at the setting up of a new political party. And I almost invariably turn it down, because they can never answer 2 basic questions. What is your plan to get 5% of the vote? And the second question is, what's your plan to win an electorate seat?
Yeah.
And they usually sit there and go, there's a lot of angry people.
Yeah.
Well, there was a lot of angry people at the last election, and it didn't work, right? So that doesn't translate into votes. Likes on Facebook don't translate into votes.
Yeah.
Retweets don't translate into votes.
It's like everything, right? Like, it looks easy from the outside, and people they read the news and they'll read blogs and they'll think, I could do this. But actually, as people who have been around politics, you and I both know that actually it's a lot of hard work and organisation that goes uncredited. And that's why I think political parties like the National Party, to be honest, need to be a bit better to their volunteers and a bit more, cultivating and respectful of their volunteers, because actually, it's... Man,
I can remember when they launched
treat them like employees.
Yeah, I can remember when they launched a membership card. I was a member back then. I haven't been a member for 15 years of the National Party, but that's when they launched a membership card. And I got this piece of plastic, and I thought, well, what do I get for this?
Yeah.
Right, I've donated some money. What do I get for being a member of the National Party? Well, what you got was a plastic card.
Yeah.
That was it. You don't get any thanks. You don't get anything else. There's no special privileges for it. And in fact, the only thing I could come up that plastic card was useful for was scraping the ice off the windscreen on the 2 days of the year in Auckland where you get a frost.
Some of them, some MPs, in fairness, are good at it. And you think some Ian Browns are someone that I think is an example of someone who's
Collins is another one.
Yep. They're both, Judith Collins is a great example.
They look after their electorate. They've got a very strong electorate organisation. Their volunteers are appreciated.
Yeah.
And that's why they've got very, very high memberships, because
even
people
when they
value
go,
that.
Even when they go out of their electorate and come and visit the provinces, they mingle amongst members, they treat members with respect, and that leads to a lot. That leads to a lot of staying power, right? And it just does. And on the other hand, if you have people who are parachuted into, that's what I always really hate a little bit. Sort of people who come back from overseas, they've made a lot of money overseas, and they come back and they're like
John Key, Christopher Luxon.
Look, I'm not. Don't draw me into anything like that, please.
I'll go there. I'm happy to go there.
No,
it was my father that recruited John Key into the National Party.
Well, let's go with David Kirk. Okay.
All right.
Okay. So people.
I was involved in that too.
Yes, I know. That's why I brought it up. So people who are they almost think that you should be grateful to them for them putting their hand up to stand, and I just think that the politics should deter as many of those people as possible, right? Like you should need to put your time in at getting to know members, being a true party member, instead of like being someone who is
parachuted in.
Yeah, a lateral hire. Like you're a lateral. We should be fewer lateral hires.
And that was a spectacular failure with David Kirk. I mean, they picked the wrong electorate to parachute him into.
Yeah.
I mean, Clem Simic was an earnest sort of a fellow, but not particularly bright, but he was a local.
Yeah. Yeah. And
the Tamaki Mafia worked really hard on that. And that's what they were known inside the National Party.
And I love that story for that reason.
Yeah. It's like you can't just, sometimes it doesn't work. You just get smashed. Well, we're coming up against time, Liam, but I think we've traversed quite a few topics there.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. It was good talk.
Yeah. So thanks so much for coming on the Crunch, and we'll have you back again soon.
It was my pleasure.
Liam's article about Chloe Swarbrick was satire, but nonetheless it was on point. And it seems it's a political construction of her own talking points that the facts show to be nothing short of intellectual dishonesty on her part. Naturally, the media go along with it. I'm in two minds about his views on Te Pāti Māori and a Maori Parliament, though. What do you think? Email inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
Would you like to be a part of reviving honest media? At RCR, we're on a mission to do just that. We report on critical, censored stories and hold those in positions of power to account. As Paul Brennan says, it's a good mission. Now there's an easy way to support RCR and at the same time receive some amazing benefits. Our Foundation Membership Club is here. As a member, you'll enjoy a host of exclusive benefits, including a daily bite-sized news digest, a backstage pass to RCR, and discounted merchandise. Find out all you need to know about our Foundation membership now at www.realitycheck.radio.
Malcolm Roberts is no stranger to controversy. He's described as a climate change denier and is part of Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party in Australia. And he was on with Jaspit and John last August, and I'm going to talk to him about the changing dynamics in Australian politics and his ongoing battle against globalist organisations. Malcolm joins me now. Senator Malcolm Roberts, welcome to The Crunch.
Thank you very much. What's The Crunch?
The Crunch? Oh, it's a political show that we have on Reality Check Radio. And I'm a bit of a notorious blogger, I guess, and commentator. And this is my show that we have on Reality Check Radio, where I sort of like to expose, well, not expose, it's the wrong word, but have a chat with politicians of all types and explore what makes them drive and what makes them tick and all of the rest of those sorts of things, rather than the argy-bargy of normal media type interviews. So that's what I do.
Okay, well, that sounds interesting. And I must say that I don't know anything about you or your show or Reality Check Radio, but I must say that I commend you, because one of the biggest problems we've got facing this world is the misinformation and disinformation coming from the mouthpiece media, the misery media, the global. Yeah,
that's a good term. Yeah, that's an absolutely brilliant term, because that's what they are, the misery media that just focus on, just doing a little bit of research for this interview, I had a look at the woke Wikipedia version of, what they say about you. They call you a climate change denialist. And these are all things that I think are creditable rather than derogatory. But anyway, that's the way they go.
How can you deny climate change? I mean, really. But I am a climate variability. I'm pro climate variability.
Well, if the climate stops changing, then we've got problems.
Well, actually, it's an interesting thing because I've been trained in statistics at the University of Chicago, which is pretty well the most quantitative university on the planet. And I learned the difference. There are two types of variability. There's inherent natural variability, which exists, day to day. Everything changes from day to day. Everything changes from minute to minute. The fastest swimmer doesn't swim the 50 meters, 100 meters in the same time exactly every time. There's variability. And then there's process change, which is where there's a step up or a trend going on that is a change in process. So the first one, there's no change in process, but there's natural variability.
Yep.
The other one is there's a step up or there's a pronounced change. The climate, we've got 24,000 data sets on climate, ocean temperatures, air temperatures, storms, frequency, duration, severity, drought, flood, all the rest of it. There's not one factor in climate where there's been a change. They're all just varying naturally and cyclically.
Well, there used to be this website online that had all of the predictions about climate change, and then it would have all the evidence to show that none of those predictions have come true. But I'm not sure it exists anymore or whether or not they can be bothered updating it. There's just so many contradictions.
Yeah. We've been fed bullshit. I don't know if that's a word you can use on your program.
It is.
I think it is because you're Kiwis.
Yeah.
I worked over there for 12 months and you use the same language we use. But there's bullshit driving our health, driving our health systems, our what we call environmental systems in this country, Murray-Darling Basin Water Authority, everything, COVID mismanagement and deceit, climate, you name it, there's bullshit.
I see two of the dictators of the COVID era were recently awarded King's Honours in Australia. Just I'm just flabbergasted to see that dictator Dan managed to get a gong.
Well, what it shows is I don't know who made this comment this morning, but it certainly shows that there's no credibility behind the gong anymore. What little credibility there was is gone.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, he resigned in ignominy, but he gets an award. It's just astonishing. And then you have a look at the Premier of Western Australia, who's probably even more draconian than dictator Dan was, and he gets one too. Maybe they should have been honest and said services to the Labor Party.
Yes, but we noticed that Palaszczuk in Queensland, who was not quite as bad as the two you just mentioned, McGowan and Andrews, but she didn't get one, and I'm wondering why.
Maybe she didn't pay to the Labor Party. That's the problem.
Well, yeah, she was kicked out. The other two left. They resigned. She was kicked out. So maybe there's hard feelings there. I don't know. It's a strange world, politics.
It is. It's a strange world. Now, one thing I wanted to talk to you about was the voice referendum in Australia. And the reason why that is that one political party in New Zealand, the ACT Party, led by David Seymour, as one of their election promises, said that we would have a referendum on what the principles of the treaty or the Treaty of Waitangi are. That's a little bit similar to the voice referendum. And there's been howls of outrage from all sorts of vested interests about that. And this bizarre claim that there's this sort of octopus-like organisation called the Atlas Network that funded opposition to the voice in Australia and is now in behind the ACT Party and its referendum, and it's part of a tactic of this octopus-like secret society that isn't that secret after all. But there's all these allegations about the Atlas Network. But how did the voice referendum change Australian politics?
I think it put the Albanese government, the short answer, it put the Albanese government on the downward trend. It showed it was the first startling major change, but more significantly, Cam, it was again, there's that word again, backed by bullshit. There was no substance to it. It was all based upon feelings and emotions and what we should be doing, what shouldn't be doing, what's right or wrong in a minority's opinion. There was no substance to it, and the people found that out. So We also saw...
I don't think the people found that out. I think the government found that out, that the people thought it was bullshit.
Yeah, but what I meant was the government tried to con us.
Yeah.
And then both sides of politics do it. They try to con us. And they thought they could skate home on just feelings and labels and denigrating people. And the public said, hey, where's your substance? There's no substance here.
Yeah.
The emperor's got no clothes. So that's why it failed, because the people woke up. And we also saw a huge referendum result, even more overwhelming than our voice referendum, and that was the Irish family and mother referendum. You know, they were very, very strong, well over 70%. I think one of them might have been over 80%. And they tried to tamper with the basics of humanity, and the Irish said, go to hell.
Well, the Irish would be very conservative, having a vastly Catholic population.
True.
I would imagine that would have been, you know, I guess you have a beltway in Canberra and in each of the state capitals. This is a beltway issue again in Ireland, that the rest of the public said, no, we're not interested in that. We actually know what's right from wrong, and we're not going to vote for that.
Right. And you're correct about the beltway. Again, in Canberra, the Australian Capital Territory has about 400,000 people, I think roughly that number. And it was the only jurisdiction in which the voice got up. Every other jurisdiction not only got smashed, it was totaled. Well over 60% in Queensland, almost 70% opposed it. So all the states, the country as a whole, and only the ACT voted in favour of it, which shows you just how out of touch our bureaucrats and politicians are.
So David Seymour should really press on with this and, I guess, reap the whirlwind of public sentiment of people who say that we need to put a stop to this ever-changing view as to what the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi are. I mean, for a start, the treaty, I don't know if you've read the Treaty of Waitangi, it's a very short document. There are no principles in it. But in legislation over the last 20 or 30 years, various different governments, either blue or red, have included clauses in legislation that said that this legislation is to honour the principles of the treaty. With there's no principles. There's 3 articles of the treaty, but there's no principles that are outlined in the treaty. So it was a legislative nullity that's grown legs, where we now have various courts in New Zealand, notably the Waitangi Tribunal, dreaming up what the principles actually are, but nobody's had a say on what those principles are.
Well, how well informed is the public? How well informed, how keen are they? Because I worked in New Zealand for 12 months in the year 2005 on the South Island and Greymouth. And my wife and kids came over for 6 months of that period, but I loved it. It was just fantastic. They called a spade back there.
But they do over there on the coast.
It was
just
wonderful.
Honest Kiwi battlers. They know what right from wrong is. They know what a man is. They know what a woman is, and they won't countenance any of this talk about various different whoopsies choosing their own gender or anything like that. They just call it how they see it.
Yes, and there are 2 memories two among many memories. I had many fine memories. They're good people to deal with. When I first arrived, I was in the middle of their union contract negotiations, and I took a hard stance on that. And so they burned an effigy of me in the park, you know. So that was one thing. But at the end of the 12 months, they had a farewell dinner, and the union president came up to me and said, "Mate, we wish you'd stay." So they're genuine people, they're down to earth people. But the other thing that stunned me, because Kiwis, I mean, no one can play rugby like you guys can. No. You're fierce, you're polished, you're professional. I mean that sincerely. Everyone looks up to the All Blacks. But I thought it was a country of no bullshit. And Helen Clark and her changed the country, because there was so much PC, politically correct speech. I couldn't get over it amongst the Kiwis, not the Greymouth people, but New Zealand generally. So I don't know how out of touch Kiwis are with the reality, but I'm guessing it won't take much to bring them back. So I'm guessing, I don't know David Seymour, but I'm guessing if he makes a campaign based upon fact rather than just gloss, then he'll win it, because Kiwis will want to come home to reality. Yeah,
I think, you say there's all this PC nonsense. It's been pervasive in New Zealand politics, particularly under Helen Clark and especially under Jacinda Ardern's regime.
Yes.
And, her regime saw a Maori renaissance in the civil service where, they all changed their names to Maori names and open every meeting with a karakia. If you tried to open it with a Christian prayer, there'd be howls of outrage, but you call it a karakia, which is a Maori word for prayer, and mumble some things in Maori, and it's all good. Everybody just accepts that because they don't want to rock the boat.
Well, the other thing that'll give you hope, Cam, is that in the European Union elections on the weekend, the Conservative parties came out very, very strongly.
In Europe, yeah.
And we also have Emmanuel Macron now calling for a snap election. I mean, before the Olympic Games start, which is a real panic move, it must be. So people are waking up around the world, gender bending. And
he's a cocky little rooster, though, isn't he, Macron?
Is he a cocky rooster or is he a puppet?
Well, I don't know, but he's another one of these short syndrome type Napoleon types.
Take it easy. No, I know what you mean. Not all of us who are short in stature have a Napoleonic complex. So I don't know. I haven't seen him, but I just know that what he says is bullshit.
Well, he was the best mate of Jacinda Ardern, so there you go.
Oh, say no more. That's it. That's good enough for me.
Now, one of the things that you're accused of is being a cooker or being part of the Looney Tunes, being part of One Nation. But One Nation seems to be getting a lot of following these days. And I've been looking at those videos that Pauline Hanson puts out, the Please Explain videos. Now, I think they're hilarious. It just cuts right to the bone on all of these. And I looked at the one about the Snowy River Power Scheme. That's the most recent one. 71,000 views I saw on YouTube. Something like that. Are you getting some cut through with those videos?
I can't tell myself because I'm not an expert in that kind of thing and I don't have the data, but they're very expensive. There's not a cent of taxpayer money goes into it. They're all funded by fundraising.
Funded by members?
Well, yes, and also donations because some people want to keep them going.
Yeah,
we've made that very clear. And also funded by some of our merchandise sales. So,
okay, yeah.
Yeah, so we know that whenever I go to a forum and I ask people about that, they, oh, yes, keep them going. They love it. And what I like about them, so I don't know if they're cutting through or not, but the response seems to be pretty good when I ask. But what I like about them is that they've got a political message.
Yeah.
They've got an educational message about the issue or about voting. They've also got a very clever, subtle sometimes in your face humor. So they're a very, very clever combination.
Yeah, I was watching one of them, and the last line was something about don't put any more money up somebody's clacker. And I thought, that's true blue Aussie, that is. Or what did you say? Dinky die, don't you? That's right.
True blue, dinky die, whatever.
I often admire Australian politics from afar, and in many respects, it's a lot more brutal than New Zealand politics, where everyone's rather polite to each other. And I sort of long for the days that New Zealand starts to have a political discourse that's a lot like Australia, where you actually hammer the politicians to keep them honest rather than, playing favourites with them.
Well, what we try to do, Cam, is I can't make any reflections on New Zealand politics because I was only there for 1 year. But what we try to do is stick with the facts and opinion. I'm saying this in truth, not in trying to come across as I'm a smart politician. But but when you ask me a question about being called a cooker, I get called lots of things, and my response usually, if I'm able to make a response, is that's a label, and labels are the refuge of the ignorant, the incompetent, the stupid, the dishonest, and the fearful. And so I gave you facts, I gave you logic, I gave you an argument, stitched it together well, and you've come back with a label. If you had the data and the facts and the logic, you would have come back with that and wiped me clean, but you haven't. So thank you. I win the debate. So I look upon labels as a wonderful sign of victory and a wonderful sign they haven't got anything to come back at me with. So I'm fine.
Yeah,
That's what I love.
It's like people on Twitter or X, as it's called now, they come onto my stream and they say things like, "Oh, you're so irrelevant." And I reply to them, and yet here you are. And yet here you are.
That is so obvious. Oh, man. No, they can't see that when they're writing it. I mean, it's just insane. When I was first on Facebook, the Galileo movement, which
Yes.
is
the dirty Galileo movement, the secret society headed up by Alan Jones.
or Andrew Bolt or whoever. Anyway,
fine Australians.
So I had someone who volunteered to help me because telling the truth, he thought I sucked at social media, so I just didn't have the touch. So I've learned a bit more over the years. But anyway, Paul said to me, what do we do about all these trolls we've got on? And I said, leave them be. Let them stay there. And because, we just hold them accountable. What were the words we use a lot of? Show me your evidence.
Yeah.
And then they'd come back the next day and I'd say, still waiting. Come back the next day, still waiting. And eventually it changed from us asking them for the evidence to our supporters trolling the trolls. And so we had hardly any trolls at all. I think in the whole time we had quite a few supporters, one of the most engaging social media sites in the country. And yet we only banned 3 people because there's no point. Our best advertisements were the people who tried to denigrate us, showing how little they had. So we did the same thing on our Senate page, and we get hardly any trolls now on Facebook. We have 2 that are resident trolls, and everyone knows who they are. Yeah. We get a few on X, but not many, and they usually take care of our supporters. Usually take care of them. So we don't ban anyone, or rarely we ban anyone. We only ban people if they lie or are completely disrespectful. So
but that's a good line. Show us your evidence, or show. Well, my favorite is show us you're working, because often, particularly in the health sector, you'll get the health Nazis that come out and say, we want to ban sugar. We've got evidence to show blah, blah, blah. And you go, well, show us you're working. And they never do. They never tell you that their survey was 3 people at morning tea in the university cafeteria.
Yeah. What I love doing is coming back the next day and just say, still waiting. Still waiting for your evidence, and come back the next day and just say, still waiting for your evidence. And then in a couple of days, it's still waiting. And everyone just looks at them and laughs, and because they haven't got any.
Yeah, well, I was sued by 3 health people because I called them troffers, and they said that was defamatory.
Well, what did someone say? And he's absolutely correct. You can't give offence, but you can take offence.
Well, exactly.
So offence is entirely in the eyes of the beholder.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
So as I said, you call me a name, a cooker or whatever. Thank you. That's a compliment that says you haven't got the evidence to me.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in New Zealand politics, we've got 2 major parties. We've got the Labour Party, which is, like your Labour Party, but more woke, probably. And we've got the National Party, which is the equivalent of the Liberal Party in Australia. Now,
and they're red and blue, are they?
Red and blue, yep.
So Labour red?
Labour's red, yep. National's blue.
I can't resist the interruption here, because in so many countries, America, Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, there are only 2 parties, and they're red and blue. Yeah,
that's right. In the US, of course, the Republicans are red. God knows why. And the Democrats are blue.
Yeah, and what I was getting to was that I don't know if it's the case in New Zealand, because I don't talk about New Zealand in this way because I don't know. But it seems to me that in this country, in America, I think in Canada, but certainly in Europe, and certainly in Britain rather, there's very little difference between the red and the blue.
That was the point I was going to make, is that I'm known for commenting. My father used to be the president of the National Party in New Zealand, right? He's met John Howard and Bronwyn Bishop and a number of other people, right? So it's steeped in New Zealand politics. Now, I'm not a member of the National Party anymore. I haven't been for 15 years. And my view is that Labour and National are the opposite sides of the same coin.
Well, I've got a different saying. 2 cheeks of the same arsehole. And I use that publicly, and people know exactly what I mean. And that's what we've seen. We've seen their policies are almost identical, Cam. Almost identical.
You could slide a cigarette paper between them. That's how close they are. Mm-hmm. The only difference is perhaps in probably the same as in Australia. You've got the Liberal Party that says that, we'll be a better manager of the economy, or we'll do things in a more constructive manner. But the reality is they're going to do the same things to us and tell us that we like it. at the same time.
I didn't think of that, a little twist you put in there and tell us that we like it. But I think Morrison destroyed the Liberal Party credentials over the economic management with his COVID response. He was terrible. But, I thought that put the Liberals and Labor on a lower keel together at last. But I think Albanese is managing to destroy the economy even faster. So.
And it's almost like Morrison's only saving grace is he's not Malcolm Turnbull.
Yeah, I don't think Turnbull would have even been as bad as Morrison, but I know what you mean.
Oh, it's just a shocker. But my point is this, right? So we've got two major parties in both countries, same as in the UK. You vote red, you get blue. You vote blue, you get red. Pretty much. Mm-hmm. That doesn't change. Correct. Do you think with the results that you're seeing in Europe now and in Argentina and other places where populism, they use that like it's a dirty word, almost a swear word, that populism is actually now taking the fore, and parties that like One Nation, like yourselves, New Zealand First in New Zealand and the ACT Party, minor parties that speak the truth are growing in stature.
Yes, I'm absolutely convinced of that. In this country, we've got a lot of people walking up to us now saying, looks like you're here to stay, and it looks like you're definitely having an impact. So that's really pleasing to see, and we're getting a lot of cut through with the line uni party in terms of Labor and Liberal.
Uni party is a good term. That's what I use too in New Zealand.
Yeah. So I used to say the Liberal Labor duopoly or the Lib Lab duopoly. Okay, but duopoly then implied that One Nation was the third choice, and it's really what I'm trying to show. And you're doing the same with the Uni Party. Is there's only two choices. You can have the Uni Party, or you can have One Nation, or you can have New Zealand First. Is it ACT or New Zealand First?
Well, we've got both. We've got New Zealand First, which is Winston Peters' party. So he's been around for, I think he was in Parliament when Noah was the Prime Minister. Helped him build the Ark, and he'll probably die in office as well. But Winston's been around a long time. He's a populist. He's Maori, but he's not woke.
Right. A populist is used as a denigratory term, but we actually turn it around and just say, well, thank you very much. Populist, as we understand the definition, is put the country first. And so we are very proudly populist, very, very proudly populist. Pauline, she's highly intelligent. She's highly capable, very determined. There's no clever political philosophy behind Pauline, no intricate webbing of
it's no bullshit, as you'd say.
Exactly. But it's very simple. She just says, first of all, does Australia benefit? Is it in the national interest? Yes, it is. Okay, next question, where's the data? And no one else in Parliament, apart from myself, says, where's the data?
Yeah.
They pretend there's data there, but they don't use it. And so that's the biggest problem of our country is the governance is just so shitty because they don't use data. They don't base it on facts. They base it on opinion.
On feels.
Well, not only feels, but also on newspaper headlines to look good, not do good, and also on the globalist agenda. Then when they base it on the globalist agenda, both Liberal and Labor, they wrap it up in lovely terms to make it feel good. So, but there's nothing, there's no substance to it.
It's all filled with truisms that when you actually scratch the surface of them, there's no evidence to support it. It's like the Labor Party said, we've invested $1.9 billion in mental health. I mean, this is the joke of it. Politicians saying they're investing in something. I mean, there's no return on that investment. There's no maths that backs up what the return is. But they say they're investing $1.9 billion in mental health, and 4 years later, the statistics are worse. So was that investing?
Well, I think there are two lines along that quote, Cam. The first is, we spent $50 billion last year. The previous government only spent $25 billion. We've done twice as much good. No, you've done probably a lot of damage because you're handing out money without any accountability. That's the first thing.
Which fuels inflation.
Well, not only the inflation, but you also fuel victimhood and locking people into their misery. And the other one is, we enacted 18,000 pages of legislation. You bastards before us only enacted 10,000 pages. Well, you've just stuffed up the economy as well, probably because of all your overregulation. So there's a misunderstanding of what governments are supposed to do. Governments are supposed to serve people. When I first got into Parliament, my first speech, I started with the words, as a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia. I got Snickers on the Labor Party side, who were in opposition back in 2016, and I got some sort of not quite that tone, but disbelief, incredulity in the Liberal Party side. My job is to represent the people, not just the people who voted for me, but the people of Queensland and Australia. Those who disagree with me as well, is to represent their views. And so that's what I'm there for.
Yeah, we famously had, a massive protest descend on Wellington, a lot like the truckers' protest in Canada and in Australia. And the Prime Minister and every politician that was currently in the Parliament refused to come out and speak to them. Just refused. And then sent in the stormtroopers to batten, bludgeon, kick, destroy, arrest people for wanting to have a say, to say, I don't agree with what you're saying. Would you please listen to me? They'd lost their jobs, they'd lost their careers, their houses, in some instances, family members through the mandates that said if you didn't get, you'd have wives saying if you don't get vaccinated, you're not going to be able to see your kids. All sorts of stuff like that was going on. And the politicians refused to listen.
That's a disgrace. I can recall in running coal mines in Australia, I can recall being chairman of the board of a private school, a community-based school. And whenever there's a problem, as the chairman or as the head of the mine, you walk out and you stand up and you're held accountable and you ask people to give you questions so that it gives you an opportunity to answer. And then sometimes it ends up, people say, oh, shit, that makes sense now. We're going away. They're happy. Or sometimes it's a matter of, I might have got it largely correct, but some fine tuning needs to be done, or the message needs to get back to the people at the coalface, So that's why, and I'd always made it a rule to go underground and be at the coalface, whether I was a general manager, executive general manager, or mine manager, to be at the coalface, because there's only one way to pick up what people are feeling. You can't get it through your middle management and senior management, because they're human and that they lose things in the translation, in the relay. So you have to go down and be available to people. Some are going to walk up and say, why did you do this for? All the rest of it. But you give them an opportunity to cry on your shoulder, give them an opportunity to tell you what they think, give an opportunity to listen to what you have to say. And people admire that. And
they sure do. They sure do. Which raises a question. Would One Nation do a deal with the coalition to form a government to keep Albo and his crowd out in the Greens?
I'm not the party leader, so I can't give you the official response, and I don't know what Pauline would say to that. I think our approach would be simply we will do whatever is in the best interest of the country. Again, is it in the national interest?
Which is the core philosophy of One Nation and what's best for the country.
That's right. So I'm guessing Pauline would either ask that question of herself and ask that question of me and the others in Parliament, or she would say something like, we'd come up with the conclusion that we will support the government in terms of supply, but we won't necessarily support them on everything. So in other words, it wouldn't be a strict deal. I don't think Pauline's had major donors come to her and say, we're willing to support you. She says, I won't change my vote. Oh, okay. And they walk out the door.
Yeah.
So she's very, very much independent. She will do what is good for the people. So I can't answer your question truthfully. I'm not trying to avoid it. I've given you some glimpses as to what I think.
That's all right. What I'll do is I'll use you to get Pauline on the show and ask you that in a couple of weeks' time. What about the teal independents? Those blue-green Womble types that are you going to develop some plans so that you can make sure that they don't hold the balance of power, gifting Albo, another term?
You're aware, of course, that David Pocock is a teal in the Senate. People don't see him as a teal because he's very careful to not mention the word teal. So for your listeners, the teals are people who are funded by Simon Holmes à Court through Climate 200. The teals are known as the teals in the mouthpiece media, the misery media, as being in the lower house only. So strictly speaking, Albanese has a even though he only has less than a third of the vote in the lower house, he has the majority of members in the members of parliament. He doesn't rely on the Teals as a support in the lower house. So he can govern on his own right that way. Where he relies upon the Teals is that Labor and the Greens together, when Lydia Thorpe was still in the Greens, they only had half the Senate numbers. So they needed someone to get them across the line and get into a majority. So they've been stitching up deals with David Pocock. Now, David Pocock has been very, very careful to not call himself a Teal. But the man is a Teal. The man is funded by Climate 200. He has his Teal policies, he has Greens policies, and his policies are ridiculous and very, very damaging. So we call him out as a Teal. So David Pocock and the Greens and the Labor Party combined to form a coalition, essentially, in the Senate. And they're the ones that whip things through. Now, what we can see, I don't know if people are aware of it, maybe you're not aware of it, but our states have 12 senators each, even our little state of Tassie. Our territories, the Northern Territory and the Australian Capital Territory, which is centred on Canberra, have only 2 senators each. The senators from the states are on a staggered term, 6-year term. They're elected every 3 years. So that keeps it, that's a good system. The territories are a fairly new addition to the Senate, and they only have 2, and they're elected only for 3 years. So they're the same as the House of Representatives, if you like. Now, normally in both territories, we've had 1 Liberal and 1 Labor. David Pocock upset the apple cart, and the Liberal got knocked out, only by preferences, and David Pocock got some pretty lefty donations. So David presents as being, a rugby boy and therefore conservative, but he's not. He's a dead set socialist and damaging to the country. And I think you bastards knocked too much into his head, but knocked him around a bit too much. Right? He was a fearless player, a very good player. So I've got to give him credit for that. But as a politician, his policies are hugely damaging to our country. And David doesn't seem to know or doesn't seem to care about that. He follows an agenda which is clearly from Climate 200 and Simon Holmes the Court's money. So he favours the UN, he favours the World Economic Forum policies and is destroying our country. So what I'm saying is that David keeps the Liberals out of the Senate in the ACT. So therefore it's in Labor's interest to butter up David and look after him, get him what he wants. And it's in David's interest to keep the Labor Party going because they're aligned more with his politics. So we've got a socialist coalition in the Senate. So you're absolutely correct. What we've been doing is calling him out on his policies, calling the Greens out in their policies, and calling David a Teal as he really is. So that's what we're doing with those.
Well, he might have captained the Wallabies, but I don't think he won any games against the All Blacks.
Well, who does?
Well, it's a temporary blip. Well, there was in the early 2000s, there was a bit of a blip there where Australia won a few things, but they haven't won at Eden Park in quite some time. So
30-something years, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that. It's a bit of a fortress.
Yeah, rugby's demolishing itself in this country, it seems. But anyway,
it's doing the same here. I think it's become too woke and weak.
Rugby?
Yeah. They've got... there was a big fuss a few years back where one particular player in Wellington decided to go against the owner of the franchise there and wanted to go on about some sort of woke sort of agenda. Wanted to wear rainbow socks or something like that. It's quite bizarre, but anyway.
I can remember how old would our son have been? He would have been 12 years old, and we were in Greymouth. Mm. And I said, let's go up to Westport.
Yep.
And just for the trip, the drive, and then play some pool and go to a restaurant up there. And I'll always remember this. We had to walk past a table of hens, women there. And there's only a narrow passage between the wall and the chair and there must have been about 16 women around the table. Yeah. And it was 9 o'clock at night. And we're walking into the pool room. And I overheard the conversation. Are you watching the game tonight? Like it's 2 o'clock in the morning against South Africa, I think.
Yeah.
And everyone on the table said, yes. I was going, what other country in the world would the women be?
Well, those are proper women on the West Coast, So.
Right. And another one I remember going into the Christchurch Cathedral. It's gone now, isn't it?
Well, it's a pile of rubble, but there's a bunch of wombles that want to rebuild it the way it was, and the cost keeps going up and up and up.
But we went for a tour of the Christchurch Cathedral, and there's only one exit point, and that was through the bookshop.
Yeah,
get sales, right?
Yeah.
And when you entered the bookshop, you turned right to find the path out. You look straight at the cash register and the main counter, right?
Yeah.
And so I walked over there to say which is the way out. There's a picture of a coffee table book, British and Irish Lions Tour of New Zealand 2005.
Yeah.
All right. And it was a fair-sized book. It was a coffee table book. And it had pride of place in the whole bookstore. I said, mate, I thought this was a religious bookstore. And he said, it is, mate. The religion of New Zealand is the rugby union.
Rugby. Now, for the benefit of the listeners, you've got a bumper sticker in your background there that says, "We love coal," and it's as black as coal on it. So, the question I want to ask you is, does nuclear power make much sense when there's cheaper options for efficient coal?
Well, our policy is simply use the cheapest form of energy there is, because to be competitive, you have to be the cheapest energy. Australia has been blessed with abundance in natural gas, but also coal. And we've got more coal per capita than any other country on the planet, I think. And our coal is amongst the cheapest in the world. It's also amongst the highest quality. You've got some very niche coals in New Zealand, but I think in terms of mass production, Australia is the top of the pops.
Well, we've got a fair bit of coal here, but our Greens have this saying, keep it in the hole. And we've got a major power producer that runs the Huntly Power Plant, which produces the base load for New Zealand's power system. And they import literally shiploads of dirty Indonesian coal when they're sitting literally on top of several coal mines in the near vicinity of that power station.
Yeah, and your coal in New Zealand is pretty good quality. We can get back to dirty coal in a minute, but what we say is use the cheapest form of power anywhere, because then you can be competitive on a global market. So my understanding is that hydropower is the cheapest. Not everywhere, but generally it's the cheapest, and you're blessed with that. Yeah. So you've got the cheapest there.
Well, it's hard to build a dam in New Zealand now because we've got the stupid legislation that was passed by the National Party called the Resource Management Act, which has meant that there hasn't been a single dam built since they passed that legislation, because there's always some snail that lives on the creek or the river that they want to dam, or there's a breeding pair of ducks that would be best shot impeding the progress, because that's what the Resource Management Act does. It impedes progress.
Similar here in the States, in I think Columbia River, well, somewhere up in the northwest of the United States, Washington, Oregon, they're actually removing dams. I mean, this is insane. So hydro is generally the cheapest. The second cheapest is generally coal. The third cheapest is nuclear. Solar and wind are not even competitive, not even close. They
don't work all the time either, because the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow.
Right. So you need 4 for one. Because the capacity is averaging about 23% of the nameplate capacity, you need 4 just to get your nameplate capacity for turbines or 4 lots of solar panels. You know what I'm getting at. And at peak hour, it's 10%. So you need 10 times as much. And then, as you point out, if you go a few days without sun or without wind, you might have 10 times what you need, but they're not producing anything. So you need batteries, which just makes it prohibitive. And then because wind and solar are scattered, you need far more transmission lines. And then because you need 10 times as much just to get your peak hour needs, you need even more or so again. So transmission costs just kill you. So, and what they've done in this country, Cam, is that the CSIRO is fraudulently putting up studies that show wind and solar are cheapest, only because all the ancillary costs are not included. So they're far more expensive, as we're finding from our power bills. So we should be going hydro, but we haven't got the water you guys have, so we should be going coal. In South Australia, though, there's an argument that says South Australia's got huge reserves of nuclear fuel, uranium. We should at least look at the alternative. It may still be cheaper to bring coal in from New South Wales and Queensland, but we should at least consider nuclear. So in some areas, nuclear may well be the cheapest, but whatever it is, we should be looking at the cheapest regardless.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, 100%. And you should look at using your own resources before importing them.
Right. So we're dependent right now on China. We send them our coal. They're already produced. We produce about 560 million tons of coal. So we used to be the biggest exporter. We're now the second biggest exporter behind Indonesia. We're about number 6 or 7 in terms of annual production. And China is heading for 5 billion tons of coal a year. 5 billion. I mean, it's just insane what we're doing. We have got the world's best coal resources and we can't use them, but we can export them, let someone else use them.
Oh, no, that's the ridiculousness of the green argument here. We're sitting on mountains of coal, but, we can't, we had, Jacinda Ardern say we're going to stop oil and gas exploration. We're going to not mine anymore our own natural resources, which to me is tantamount to treason. Not using God-given resources in a country to benefit the people of that country. They always go on and compare us to Sweden and Norway and places like that, which have got vast oil reserves. And guess what? They use their own oil reserves and they plough it into the social policies that are the envy of the world, funded by industry. But Jacinda Ardern wanted those gold-plated socialist policies, but didn't want to pay for it with the resources of our country. It's just insane.
That's correct. They've done a far better job. What we've done in this country is we have enabled 90% of Australia's large companies are foreign-owned, and since 1953 have paid little or no tax. That's not me saying that. That's a quote from Jim Killaley, who was a former Commissioner of Taxation. So what we've done is we've enabled the largest tax avoider in the world, Chevron, to exploit our resources, give us bugger all for it, Cam, and we send it to Japan and they charge $3 billion a year on import duties for our gas that goes into the country. So we're not getting that at all. So we can't use our coal here, but we can send it to China. And we can send our coal to China where they burn it along with their own coal and sell electricity for 8 cents a kilowatt hour. We sell it here. We don't produce it. We sell it here for 25 cents. So straight away, we are exporting our manufacturing jobs to China. We're subsidizing then with electricity tariffs, raising prices to subsidize Chinese wind turbines to be built, shipped, installed, and then operated with subsidies that drive up our price of electricity, which sends more of our manufacturers to China. So China wins hand over fist. They're not doing anything wrong. They're doing what any smart businessman would do. And
that's the arbitrage of it. They can make money off your product.
Off our stupidity.
Yeah.
I mean, it is plain stupid. I'm not bragging when I say this, that there's really a second message that I'm getting at. But I don't know if you're aware of Tim Ball, Professor Tim Ball from Canada.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, wonderful man. He was the best in the world on this climate bullshit. He said that, to his knowledge, I'm the only member of any Congress or Parliament anywhere in the world that has held a government science agency accountable over climate. Now, sure, some people have asked questions in Senate estimates, hearings, those kinds of things, but no one has pursued the CSIRO. I've had 3 meetings with the CSIRO. They're the government's top advisor on climate. First meeting, they admitted that they have never said carbon dioxide from human activity is a danger. So I said, who has said that? Because they're quoting you guys. And they said, you better go and ask them. But that's the politicians, right? So it's not CSIRO saying that. Then the second meeting, remember that all this climate fraud was based upon, you can tell I'm starting to get wound up here. But it's just inhuman what they're doing, Cam. It's vile. So the second thing was this climate change. Before it became climate change was global warming. Yeah. We were told that the world is going to boil. And so it was all based upon unprecedented, unrelenting, ever-present rising temperatures. And the CSIRO looked at me, and I was sitting next to the climate science acting head. We were about a metre apart, and he looked at me and said, today's temperatures are not unprecedented. No. It's all bullshit. And so the Prime Minister of this country at the time when we installed the most devastating destruction of our electricity sector, and it's now paying off in terms of high prices, poor reliability, was John Howard, a Liberal. Every major climate and energy policy was introduced by the Liberals, yet the public think it was the Labor Party. So Howard introduced the most far-reaching. And 6 years after he got booted from office, that bastard said in a public address in London that on the topic of climate science, he was agnostic. He had no science. So the whole thing is a fraud, and now we're paying for it because our inflation rates are very high, our cost of living is very high, and we're exporting our industries overseas. This is insane, and it's all based upon a lie.
It's almost criminal.
It is criminal because the CSIRO is committing fraud by perpetrating the fraudulent claim that solar and wind, I don't call them renewables, solar and wind are the cheapest, and they're not. They're the most expensive by far.
Well, it's like people who say that Teslas are, good for the environment. You say, well, where did they get all the cobalt from? Where did they get all the lithium from? Where did they get all the aluminium from? It's all from extractive industries. It's just a snow job, a PR thing. Now, if you said, well, Teslas are technologically advanced and they're this and they're that and all those sorts of things that are true, no problem. But don't make shit up.
Right. But in addition to that, there's a basic figure about a Tesla. It costs a lot more than its equivalent counterpart with a petrol or diesel engine. That is because of the huge amount of energy and resources that go into producing a Tesla. A Tesla has a huge footprint in terms of resource use. Solar and wind have huge footprints in terms of resource use. That's why they can never compete with coal, oil, natural gas, and nuclear and hydro, because they're just so expensive to produce. I'll give you one figure. What's his name? Alex Epstein. Have you heard of him?
Yes, I've read his books.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant guy.
Yep. Brilliant, yeah. He's a lovely man to talk to as well. Got the numbers at his fingertips. He has a figure in his book, what's it called now? The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. He has a figure in there that says for each kilowatt hour, I think, unit of energy, let's just focus on the unit of energy. For each unit of energy from a coal-fired power station, it averages about 35 tons of steel.
Yeah.
For each same unit of energy from a wind turbine, 546 tons of steel.
Yeah.
You cannot get cheap power for that reason. It is resource intensive, it is energy intensive to manufacture, and it is very, very low in terms of output. So therefore, you've got a very high unit cost of electricity. It's inherent.
Yeah, well, I agree with you on all of those points. The books by Alex Epstein just make that case that that fossil fuels have improved the outcomes of humankind exponentially beyond belief than all of these other things that are touted, solar and wind and all those things are never going to be able to reach that level ever.
What were we, when I say we as humans, as humanity in the Western countries, the developed countries, what were we using for lighting in 1850?
Yeah, that'll be candles.
Candles and whale oil.
Yep.
Coal is the best friend of the whales. Exactly. I'm serious.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
It's a funny story, but I'm serious. What were we using for cooking and for heating?
Yeah, similar products.
Timber. And coal is the best friend of the forest in the world. Tim Ball again said, the area covered of forest land in developed continents is 30% greater than it was 100 years ago. What's the best friend of the forest? Coal.
Yeah, coal.
And you've got high density energy packed into a tiny spot, and you've got a minimum land footprint on the
surface.
Nuclear power plant, coal power plant, or a dam. Not so much a dam, but a hydroelectric power unit. You've got minimum footprint on the land. You've got minimum impact on the environment, but you've got above all, the number one thing for determining human impact on the environment is our energy use. The lower we get our energy costs, the more energy we use, the more productive we are, the more productive we are, the less impact on the environment. I mean, this thing here, my iPhone, has got more songs on it than my entire album collection when I was in my teens, you know.
It's incredible technology, the things that can be done with that, but it all has to be powered somehow. And it's not with unicorn farts and sprinkles.
Not only that, the footprint of this phone is far less on the environment than boom boxes and all the rest of it in the past. Yeah. So we've got that to be grateful for. But we only get that human progress, the technological progress, the scientific progress, if we decrease our costs of energy. And humans, since 1850, have been on a relentless decline of energy costs per unit costs until about 1990s, when we artificially increased them in the so-called developed and insane Western civilization to comply with the climate madness.
I think you need to have a good long chat with Shane Jones, and I think you should give him a couple of those bumper stickers as well with "We Love Coal" on them. He'll show them off and enrage the green wombles in New Zealand no end with those. But I think it'd be well worth you and him hooking up at some point and discussing mining and how Australia and New Zealand can move ahead into prosperity by using our own resources.
Well, I'd be happy for an introduction if you can give me an introduction and give him a copy of Alex Epstein's book.
Yeah, I've got a couple of copies and his second book as well. So
I haven't read his second book yet.
Yeah, well, he gave me a free copy after I contacted him and said, I'm interested in doing an interview. And he says, I'm a bit busy at the moment, but here's my books. So he ended up with 2 signed copies of both of his books.
I did a podcast with him and with about 17 other climate skeptics and economic climate skeptics. And he said, I'll give you half an hour. And we didn't stop for an hour and a quarter.
Oh, I know. He's brilliant.
Wonderful. And
he's got all the facts.
Oh, impressive young man.
Well, we're up against time, Malcolm, and it's been fabulous having a chat with you. And I'm sure the listeners of The Crunch will enjoy that. And of course, you were on earlier or late last year or in August last year with Jaspreet and Don, and had a bit of a chat with them. They don't believe in the climate bullshit either.
Well, they're using their minds and their head.
Yeah, that's right. But that's what we're all about. So it's been a real pleasure having you on The Crunch.
I've enjoyed it, Cam.
Thank you for your time, and we'll touch base again on what's happening in Australian politics.
Sure, happy to. And I mean what I said at the start. This very, very important role you've got, because we've got to get people off the mouthpiece misery media and onto the reality. So thank you so much for being an independent podcaster.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Broadcaster, actually.
Broadcaster, yeah. Well, that was an enjoyable interview with Malcolm Roberts. He's a true blue Aussie politician who puts his country first, and he certainly calls a spade a spade. What do you think? Email inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
Thanks for tuning in to RCR, Reality Check Radio. If you like what you're listening to, or even if you don't agree with what you're listening to, then get in touch with us now. You can text us with your message to 2057, that's 2057. Or if you'd rather email us, you can at inbox@realitycheck.radio. We would love to hear from you, so get in touch with us now. You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
And now it's time for Cam's Buddies. This week we'll find out what they think about the announcement on Monday that there was an inquiry, there will be an inquiry involving no less than 12 government agencies looking into the shenanigans at Manurewa Marae and involving Te Pāti Māori. My producer has them all lined up and ready to go, so let's go now to Cam's Buddies. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Miles. Good to have you back.
Hi, Cam. How are you today?
Fantastic, as usual.
Excellent. Pleased to hear that.
So, what are your thoughts about Christopher Luxon announcing this inquiry that involves 12 government departments looking into the shenanigans at Manurewa Marae, access to data across 12 government agencies?
Well, I'm sorry to say, I think it's a big fail for Luxon. I think he needed to actually have realised that if 12 agencies were involved, then something serious is or was going on, and there needs to be one coordinated inquiry, and that needs to have sufficient weight behind it to compel people, and needs to be a rather more wide-ranging than Luxon would possibly like. But I think if I was to give it a mark, it would be a fail. It's a failure because 12 separate entities doing 12 separate inquiries, that is going to be 12 separate whitewashes.
Can't say that, Miles. It'll be a brown wash, if anything.
Well, you know, here's the thing. Luxon styles himself as, you know, corporate. He knows what side's up in corporate. I can tell you that he has really demonstrated a lack of political nous with this one, because it has the potential with 12 separate inquiries to get away from him. For example, here's a scenario. What happens if one of the inquiries says nothing to see here? Okay. Well, What do we do then? And how does that reflect on the other 11? What happens if 4 of them say nothing to see here? What about the rest? You know, it's just mind-boggling in the stupidity not to coordinate the inquiry.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with it, understanding the rationale here, because there's a whole lot of fifth columnists that are in the civil service. They're all going to protect their derrieres.
Correct.
And, you know, perhaps they will say it's a bit of a brown wash, but where there's smoke, there's fire. And it sounds trite and it sounds contrived, but we haven't got just one disgruntled person that you could say, oh, well, they're just a disgruntled employee, they're upset. You've got several whistleblowers here, including some from inside government departments. You have claims that the Electoral Commission says they've never received a complaint. Well, I happen to know that there are complaints to the Electoral Commission because I've spoken to some of the people who laid complaints with the Electoral Commission. So there's definitely some shenanigans going and butt covering going on here, and I'm not at all comfortable that we're going to get a result. I mean, I actually think what will happen is John Tamahiri will come out smelling of roses. There'll be some underlings that get thrown under the bus, as always is the case in these situations, and then they'll go, see, I'm exonerated. And then where are we?
Well, I'll tell you something. It's even worse if, you know, you've got 12 separate inquiries and say 4 of them say, oh, nothing to see here. What are the other 8 going to do? I mean, are they going to say, oh, there's been some serious issues? No, of course not. And, you know, the problem that Luxon's got is all of his own creation.
Yeah.
And the stupidity, or perhaps the lack of political nous, is going to cause a big problem with this for Luxon. And I can assure you that down the road, maybe 6 months, people are going to be saying, well, what happened? And if what I suspect is going to happen, then Luxon is not going to come out of this with a clean pair of hands.
No, well, you know, it shows, well, to my mind, it looks like weak leadership.
Well, to my mind, it looks like a lack of political nous. It looks like he has failed to consider the consequences. If you have 12 separate entities, let's call them jurors. If they're not all unanimous, it's not a guilty verdict. And is that going to be the way out, that 4 of these inquiries are going to say, oh, nothing to see here, so therefore there was nothing really going on? I struggle with this at every level.
Yeah, I can't see a positive outcome for Luxon. But you know what I can see? I can see plenty of hay being made by New Zealand First and the ACT Party with this.
Yes, and I think that the public, the eye-opening thing for the public is just how much taxpayers' money has been funneled into organisations that have no accountability and indeed organisations that may well have misused that taxpayers' money. I mean, I don't know. I'm not close to any of this, but the allegations to me look fairly severe, and the fact that John Tamahiri has come out, of his corner with the gloves on, I would say that he is concerned that some of these allegations are not going to end well for his organisation.
No, I don't think they will. But, I actually quite like John Tamahiri. I've always got on really well with him and engaged with him in a respectful manner, and I've had some respect for him in the past. But that's waning quite considerably as more and more of this information comes out. But he is a rascal, and he tries it on, and he's helped and assisted by a weak media who probably are in line with what he's trying to say, and so they don't challenge him like they would any other party. And that's where we're being let down. We're being let down by the very same people who are crying crocodile tears about who's going to hold the powerful to account, and they're failing to hold him to account. And it's up to people like Thomas Cramner and other people that are writing on blogs to hold him to account. And that's a tragedy for New Zealand's democracy, that the very people who talk about the loss of journalists being bad for democracy are the same ones that are ignoring what appears to be corruption at a serious level without saying anything or doing anything or running interference on their behalf.
Can I say you can add 12 government departments to that list? If they're going to run their own inquiry, it's just like asking me if my bedroom's tidy. The answer is, of course, my bedroom's tidy. And, these 12 separate inquiries, they'll be inquiring into themselves. Do you think they'll find anything wrong with what they did? Maybe there was a procedural thing here and we didn't have this letter correctly authorised. No, I'm sorry. Having someone investigate themselves, as in 12 government departments investigating themselves, is just a sign of a lack of political nous, and I think that Luxon is going to have to deal with this again down the road when people won't accept the findings of these, I think you put it perfectly clearly, fifth columnist civil servants investigating themselves. Nothing to see here, they'll all cry.
Yep, so it's the fox investigating who's been raiding the hen house. Wasn't me.
Correct.
There's something that looked like a fox, though, but it wasn't this fox.
Yeah, and, I think Luxon, he needs to actually, right now, he needs to take stock and realise he's made a colossal mistake, and he needs to say to the 12 entities, I'm sorry, but here is the inquiry. These are the terms of reference. You will be required to give evidence, and an independent person, independent of your government department, independent of government, will make a determination. And can I just say for the record, my respect for the Electoral Commission is at an all-time low. I just can't believe how poorly the Electoral Commission performs. I mean, whoever's in charge of that, and I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't know, but whoever's in charge of the Electoral Commission deserves a don't come Monday.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. Thanks for your opinions there, Miles. Very much appreciated, and I'm sure the listeners will agree with you. Thanks for calling into Cam's Buddies.
Okay, and we'll see you next week.
Absolutely. See you. Hello, Lynley. Welcome to Cam's Buddies.
Oh, hi, Cam. How's things?
Oh, box of fluffies. Everything's going swimmingly in the world. What about you?
Oh, really good. I've had a great week, especially following all the news and scandals.
I love scandals. It's just a feast for me to tuck into and look into. And speaking of scandals, I thought what we'd talk about tonight is the announcement on Monday from Christopher Luxon that there's going to be a wide-ranging inquiry involving no less than 12 government departments on the shenanigans that have been going on with Te Pāti Māori and Manurewa Marae and all the guff associated with that. What are your thoughts on that, Lindley?
Well, what can I say? It looks like straight-out bribery, corruption and election rigging to me, in a nutshell. But I don't suppose you do knitting, Cam. But
No.
some of our listeners will. Unravelling this is like trying to sort a skein of wool after the kitten's been in it.
Unravelling's what I do.
Yeah, well, have a go at a skein of wool sometime.
Yeah.
And you'll get my drift. Anyway, Mr. Luxon says he wants his inquiry to distill and synthesise, which is sort of stuck in my mind.
It sounds like
does
bullshit
sound
to
rather
me.
the same. It sounds the same to me as the kitten in the skein of wool, actually.
Yeah, it sounds very corporate, doesn't it?
It does. I know that he's trying to present himself as the man of reason and all the rest of it, and I am relying on the presentation of what he has said from the mainstream media, and I must rein myself in a bit over that, because they can make things look a lot different to what they really are. But I was struck by the very soft tone of both he and Christopher Hipkins. They sort of said the right words, but I didn't hear any sort of indignation or anything like that. And really it is an absolutely outrageous list of scandals, alleged scandals, isn't it?
It's not just from one person either. There's multiple whistleblowers here. There's people from the Marae. There's people that are associated with Destiny Church that have been involved with the Marae. There's people in government departments. But bizarrely, you've got the Electoral Commission claiming there's never been any complaints. Well, I happen to know there's several complaints because I've spoken to some of the complainants who have got emails and an email trail showing that they have complained to the Electoral Commission. So that's going to be somewhat embarrassing when that comes out.
Well, it certainly is. As I understand it, the early attempts were made to alert Stats New Zealand and Ministry of Social Development, and they were ignored. So that was while everything was actually happening, wasn't it? And then after that, they had, I think, 7 complaints were made, and some were from Labour, Vision New Zealand, and to the Electoral Commission. I mean, you would have thought they'd have been... Well, I understand actually that they did look into it, but they've conveniently just let those social media videos stay up and everything until after the election. I mean, what's going on here?
Well, what's interesting is MSD has been rather silent. It's the Ministry of Social Development have been silent over the allegations about their involvement in the Manurewa Marae saga. What do we find out? What do we find out on Tuesday via some people who have been digging into things on X, or Twitter as it used to be called? Turns out that MSD has run a jobs expo at the Marae when Tash Kemp was the CEO. So just 10 days out from the election where you could get a job and also enjoy a free hangy and coffee, you know? So
yes.
It's hilarious.
Well, yeah, it is. It's like a black comedy, really. And, I mean, Mr. Tamahiri and Ms. Kemp and others, they seem to be right through this whole thing. So, some of them have got that many posts, I couldn't possibly tell you what they are. They've got so many. Yeah. They should not be in so many positions of power. It's just wrong.
I mean, it is wrong when you look at something like this. They call it an employment expo. Right, 10 days out from the election, which at a polling booth, because the Marae was a polling booth, so people could attend the Marae for this employment expo, get free hangi, coffee, donuts, ice cream, health checks. Oh, and of course you can vote at the same time, all at the Marae that provides you with bucket loads of free stuff, and where the CEO just happens to be on the ballot paper.
I know, and you forgot the $100 grocery vouchers. although that was some days later, but that was to switch roles, and it wasn't salad rolls, was it? It was electoral rolls.
Yeah.
And talking of salad rolls, that list of freebies that you just called out, it's no wonder they've got a health problem, is it? I mean, would you be tempted by loaded donuts and a free hangi? I certainly wouldn't.
No, I'm not a big fan of hangi, to be fair. Never really been.
I had one once.
Yeah, it's not appealing.
No, not for me, but certainly not donuts.
I'm partial to donuts and ice cream, but I don't drink coffee either, so maybe I'm not the target market.
But would it actually tempt you to do something that's a bit shady? A bunch of donuts?
Not me, no. Plenty of other people, possibly.
This is right. But I'll tell you what, the Maori Party heads, they're a real worry to me, and they have been for a long time, ever since I saw that geezer stand up in Parliament, and I cannot remember now whether it was Tamahiri or the hat one, Waititi, but I can remember him standing up and ranting on about the Vision 40 thing and how the Maori were going to have sovereignty by a certain date. And since then, I've been really quite worried about it.
It wouldn't have been Tamahiri because he hasn't been in Parliament since he was booted out of the Labour Party. So it wouldn't be him.
No,
it would have been Rawiri Waititi. But I take your point. Yeah, go ahead.
That has been a real concern to me ever since then, because he was so committed to what he was saying. And I can see that sooner or later a signed piece of paper will contain them as well as a cobweb around Goliath. They're not they're not honourable people, and they're not going to be contained by signing an agreement on a piece of paper.
No,
that's what I can see.
But what I find interesting in looking back at history, and I love history. I did really well at school with history.
Right.
But you learn from history. Now, some people say, oh, no, they've got a very small following, don't really need to take much notice of them. They're not that popular. Just ignore them. Well, somebody did that in Germany, trying to ignore a little Austrian fellow with a silly moustache. And that didn't go so well for the rest of us, ignoring him while he built a little army of thugs, started smashing and breaking and assaulting and, various other forms of thuggery to get into power. Eventually ended up in power and brought the world into a global war. I'm not saying that Te Pāti Māori will do that, but I'm saying that we shouldn't ignore what they say and what they do, because they are clearly telling us out loud what their plans are for New Zealand.
They absolutely are. And when they stand up in Parliament and say it, you do have to listen. And I fear that they're just spoiled brats. They're not unlike a spoiled 2-year-old, really. But what makes me really cross is it's colonisation's values that is actually spoiling them. It's our values that let them get away with things and listen to ideology and everything. And I think they should have been held account many, many decades ago. And they're like a horse with a bit between its teeth now. They've had a taste of their own power. And I think it is actually a real worry. And then Waititi said, in one other stage, he said, this was just prior to the election, he said that the Maori Party will establish a Maori Electoral Commission if they got voted in and take matters into their own hands. And he said that Pākehā could join him and jump into his waka and that they'd look after us. Well, I'll tell you what, Cam, I'd rather jump into the Titanic where I'd have a 1% chance of landing a lifeboat than rely on Mr. Waititi, wouldn't you?
Well, especially with the women and children first policy in the Titanic. was interviewed on RCR, and he made the comment that what we don't realise about this crowd, Tea Party Maori, is that what they're doing is a Stalinist denationing or similar by a bunch of Marxists who have links to the CCP in China. And, I don't think he's wrong on that. I think we're seeing cultural Marxism at its extreme, causing problems in a society that they'll say we can fix using their methods.
Using the Maori methods or the Chinese methods?
Both. It's very similar.
Well, I'm a bit more rude than that, really. I just think that they've had a taste of money. They know where to get free money from, and they're all in for it. And it's very hard to hold people back once they've had a taste of that. I think it's all about the money.
Yep. Rawiri Waititi said that he was declaring independence from Parliament, but I haven't seen any evidence that he's handed back his paycheck from Parliament.
No, there's no such thing in his statement as independence. If we're independent, we have to make our own way, don't we?
Well, that's right. So,
no, they're not making their own way. And I did see somewhere that he said that the tax system should fund them. He actually said that. Yeah,
that's what they interpret the treaty as. Article 3 says you all pay and we take. That's how they interpret Article 3 of the treaty. They talk about partnership, but it's a one-way partnership. That's actually not a partnership because a partnership implies that you're both working together for the future of New Zealand, and it's clear that they're not. So you reckon these reviews will be a brown wash?
Well, I don't think they will be anything like they should be. They should have jumped on this so big. I mean, look what happened when New Zealand First got chased around by the Serious Fraud Office. That was an absolute outrage. It was all through the media, and it went on and on and on. It was an absolute outrage the way they presented that. This particular scandal, which I think is really bad, it's just a very soft report at this stage. So what does that say about the review?
Yeah, well, that's, I think, where we're going to all end up in 6 months' time, when eventually it trundles through the civil service and the politicians, and we'll find out nothing to see here. It's a figment of everybody's imagination.
No, they should sack the lot of them, teach them a proper lesson.
Yeah.
Good kick up the backside would do wonders. Okay, Cam, well, thanks for that. It's a very interesting topic anyway.
Very interesting. Thank you very much for your call to Cam's Buddies.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Paul. Good to have you back.
Thanks for having me back. How are you, Cam?
Oh, fantastic, mate. What about yourself?
Yeah, pretty good, mate. Pretty good. Things are going well for me, as often they are.
Oh, well, that's what happens, if you have a positive disposition in life, good things happen to you often.
Well, I think I'm an invoice paranoid. I think the world is conspiring to do me good.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. A very good way of looking at it. The opposite of doing good is doing bad. What do you think of the news on Monday evening, Christopher Luxon announcing a wide-ranging inquiry with 12 government departments looking into the shenanigans at Manurewa Marae and the involvement of those departments and the involvement of Te Pāti Māori?
Yeah, I think it's a bit interesting. I think that when the electorate seat of one is close, and I think if I remember
42
rightly,
votes.
42 votes. That was in the recount, was 4 before that. Yeah. And I think the Labour candidate, what's his name, Hehir.
Yep, Hehir.
I think he was a minister and he was doing pretty well. And 5 days before that, he was 37 in the poll, and Tiakatai, or whatever her name is, was 27. So he was way ahead of her. And, Takatai Kemp. I think he was way ahead of her, and so I'm thinking, well, that's a bit interesting. And that was a COVID station, the Manurewa Marae. That was a place you could go and get your COVID jab, and so that they had access to people's health numbers, I would imagine. And so if there's a bit of crossover there and then they start recruiting people to come forward and vote in that seat for Te Akatai, then I'm suddenly thinking, yeah, that sounds like Te Pāti Māori got an extra seat there in the overhang that should have been Labour's, and there'd be one less in the overhang.
It's even more interesting than that. On Tuesday, somebody on Twitter or X has revealed that 10 days before the election, on October the 4th, the Ministry of Social Development held an employment expo at Manurewa Marae, where Tash Kemp was the CEO. So 10 days out from the election, you could go along where you could find out about jobs, and you could also enjoy a free hangi, coffee, donuts, ice cream, get some health checks, and of course you could swap from the general role to the Maori role and vote, all at the Marae. That provides you with bucket loads of free stuff, and where the CEO just happened to be on the ballot paper.
Yeah, there seems to be something interesting there, doesn't there? And I know that John Tamahiri's been a great one saying, oh, nothing to see here, nothing. Give us your evidence, there's nothing to see here. Well, I remember some while ago, and this is just allegedly that I saw it, I was talking to someone at one of these businesses, and the shredder used to go flat strap when there was ever an investigation into some people. And I ended up selling a phone system into something that John was in fact quite high up in. And I remember thinking the Waipareira Trust, when they bought this phone system, that's where I was told and saw that the shredder was actually a really popular item. And so I'm thinking, when these things are popular, often the shredder's going because some evidence isn't actually that handy to be read at this time. And I don't know that there was anything untoward going on, but I do know that the shredder was just on full bore. And I remember thinking, that's a bit interesting.
Yeah, it is a bit interesting.
And
I quite like John Tamahiri. He's a rascal, and he's a bit of a wide boy, but I kind of admire him for having the front to do some of the things he does. But I'm really struggling with this one. This seems to be systemic, and it seems to be untoward, and it seems to have affected the election result.
Oh, I think it's affected the election result. And also, if I remember rightly, wasn't this the seat that John Tamahiri had a good run at and missed an election or two before to Hehir?
That's exactly the seat that we're talking about, Tamaki Makaurau, and that's
being the case,
right.
He would have a bit of an interest in, when you lose something to someone, you've got a bit more passion about it. And I'm not saying he did anything, but when he comes up with the thing, show us your evidence, otherwise sod off, he's not saying I didn't do it. He's not saying we didn't do it. He's not saying it didn't happen. He's saying, show us your evidence, otherwise it's just innuendo. And I'm thinking, good-o.
It's ballsy, though. I mean, it's a ballsy call. Show us your evidence. And naturally, of course, if the evidence is presented, he'll say, oh, well, they're just a disgruntled staff member, and they've fabricated it. They've made it up. They've hacked it. They've done there's a million things that he can use. Well, my prediction is that these inquiries will throw some low-level functionaries under the bus. Somebody in the low level in the Maori Party will go under the bus, and John Tamahiri will proclaim that they're all squeaky clean and it was a couple of rogue elements. That's what I reckon is going to happen.
Well, my thought is that what they're going to say is it's racist and you're picking on us because we're Maori.
Oh, they've already said
there was nothing to see here. Yes, well, exactly, but they'll be saying more. And even when caught red-handed, it's just a racist slur on Maori. And my belief is that the government will capitulate to that and do absolutely nothing.
Well, I think Christopher Luxon's in a hard place here because he has to appear tough. And sorry, he didn't appear tough. He appeared weak on Monday night. But I think that Winston Peters and Shane Jones and David Seymour will be licking their lips with glee that Luxon has been so weak on this, because they can just use Parliament all day long to highlight all of the inconsistency, and they'll be the ones who profit from this, not the National Party.
Exactly. And I think David Seymour's got a very balanced thing that he's saying. He's saying, well, let's have a look at the evidence, and let's use the evidence to exonerate the Pāti Māori or prosecute them. I quite like that he's thrown in that exonerate. I'm thinking, who's thinking that's going to happen?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever going to happen, just quietly.
But I did think it was quite a wise thing for him to throw in there, because to say, well, if they've been maligned unfairly, let's exonerate them. I'm thinking those are quite good words.
Yeah, he's very cunning, isn't he? I mean, you have to give David Seymour that. He is very, very cunning.
Well, it's the smart thing to do in this situation. I think it makes him look balanced and fair, even though I'm pretty sure in his own mind, and this is only my opinion again, that he's thinking this is only going to turn out one way.
Yeah, well, David Farrer posted something interesting on his website about the Waiparea Trust. In 2020, they had, and you'll like this, just as a summary with the facts from the balance sheet. In 2020, their income was $56 million with a surplus of $5 million, and they had net assets of $49 million and an average senior salary of $200,000. And in 2023, just 3 or 4 years later, the income was $72 million for a surplus of $16 million, and net assets had jumped to $84 million, while average senior salaries were $511,000.
Yeah, there's no troughing and no one's got their hand in the till. And I wouldn't hear you say anything like that.
I mean, what you're seeing is about the level of profitability there for a commercial business would be brilliant, but this is a charity that we're talking about. So, between 2020 and 2023, their income increased 29%, but the surplus increased 220%, and the net assets grew by 71%, and the average salary to the top charitable executives in there increased 155%. It sounds like a pretty good luck that they've got going there.
Well, it's very interesting that if you're in a charity and a staff member's getting $500,000 salary, you'd want them to perform something like it has been performing, to be fair.
Yeah.
But what legal activity can you think of that you can do that can grow that like that, other than hanging off some form of government department giving you money?
Well, that's where they get their money from. But you think about having net assets of $84 million, right? And on a 5% interest rate, let's say it's a lot of that's cash in terms of the assets. I imagine some is buildings and they're receiving rents and things like that. But you're probably getting about $5 million in return on that, just on the asset side of the balance sheet, let alone all the other government grants and the income that comes from those.
Mm. And the real question is, who's been helped and how much by this thing?
Well, that's the thing. If it's a charity, there has to be some people who are beneficiaries of that charity who have received some largesse or some help or something like this. And perhaps we should be saying exactly the same thing to John Tamahiri. Show us your evidence. Show us your evidence that this charity is making a difference. And how can you be billing the government for $72 million a year and having a surplus of $16 million? Maybe we need to cut your funding by $16 million.
Yeah, it's almost like a school, isn't it? That when you have a balance sheet growing in a school, then the money that's been supplied by the taxpayer to the government back to the school has to be used for the students that are attending the school. So you can only make a small profit there to make sure you've got some reserves for future spending. And so that's the same thing, I imagine, with something like the Waiparea Trust. If they're making a big profit, one would assume they're not actually helping the people in the area for housing as they thought that they should be, could be, or would be.
Oh, it's astonishing. But let's hope that these inquiries are not brown washes, that they do actually find something there, either to exonerate John Tamahiri, the Waipirira Trust, the Maori Party, and everyone involved, or prove the point of the whistleblowers, and then we get to throw the book at them. But I'm afraid I just have no confidence that they will throw the book at them if they do find such things.
Do you think it's reasonable that someone at the trust level gets paid more than the Prime Minister, I wonder?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I don't think it is reasonable. There's plenty of other charities out there that could do with some of that money, I would imagine. I'm pretty sure that Kids Can would benefit from a fair whack of that money, and they've got a proven track record of providing help. And then you've got everyone moaned about Mike King's charity getting government money, and there seemed to be an inordinate amount of scrutiny over that, but nobody says anything about Waipirira Trust. Interesting.
Well, I liked Mike King. One of his philosophies is we don't use the money that we've raised here for administration. We use it all to go to help people that are in need. And I thought that's a pretty good way they've done things there. But also, my understanding, and I heard this, that the Waipirira Trust helped fund some of the Te Pāti Māori political candidates. And I'm thinking, it can't be true.
It is true. No, it is true. And the Electoral Commission looked at that and sort of washed their hands of it. And it's probably, a fair bit of, brown shoe polish or something involved in that. But, there wasn't, everybody said nothing to see here. And they were declared as loans from John Tamahiri and the Waipirira Trust. But, when the New Zealand First Party uses creative ways to achieve donations, the Serious Fraud Office gets involved, don't they?
Yeah, even though they're fair and legitimate and legal in the case of New Zealand First, so it turns out. I mean, everybody gets exonerated fully. And, these ones, they don't want to go any further because it might have a bad look, or you might be being racist. And I'm thinking, wow.
Yep, wow, indeed. All right, Paul, thanks for calling into Cam's Buddies, and we'll talk again next week.
Take care. Bye for now.
Welcome, Jack, everybody's favourite on Cam's Buddies. Well, one person anyway.
Whatever. One person. I had to pay a large amount of money to get that one person to say something nice.
It was your son, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Dear. Well, glad to hear you laughing. What we're going to talk about is probably not a laughing matter. I'm interested in your thoughts on these wide-ranging inquiries into the shenanigans at Manurewa Marae, Te Pāti Māori, and possibly the involvement of Waipirira Trust as well, and these 12 government departments, and what your thoughts are on that, whether there'll be a result or no result, or a brown wash or a whitewash or whatever.
Well, first of all, I don't think anyone's surprised. But to be fair, what they've done, or alleged to have done, is really nothing compared with the example that's been set by several European people in this country. I can name a couple of them, but I won't, who bought an island off the Coromandel Peninsula, and what they did leaves John Tamahiri looking like a patron saint. Yeah, I don't know whether anything will come of it. I mean, there's so many crooks in this country. I think Winston Peters could probably name every one of them. He's had dealings with most of them and sued them for one reason or another. But getting back to John Tamahiri and co., who knows what will happen? Probably nothing, as usual, and it'll just cost a lot of money.
Yeah, it'll cost a lot of money, and I think we'll hear that nothing to see here. There might be a couple of low-level people get thrown under the bus, but we'll all be declared to be kosher and everything's all good, nothing to see here. And by the way, we've just spent $10 million investigating it.
Yeah, that's my thoughts.
All right. So you don't have any confidence at all. What about the impact on Christopher Luxon with this? He's the one who's announced this inquiry. If it comes back and it shows that and more revelations come out and it's still, nothing to see here, will that impact him, do you think?
No, I don't think anybody really cares. To be honest, see he's going down in the polls again. Although, to be fair, he is working quite hard at the moment. I'll give him his due there.
He's not getting any credit for it in the polls, though,
doing a
is
bit
he?
of stuff. No, but then nobody that's working hard seems to be getting any credit in the polls. And the ones that are doing absolutely nothing are going up. I can't believe it. I don't know where they get these polls from.
It's nuts, isn't it?
No one's told me.
Well, maybe they should. Maybe they should poll you. They'd get all sorts of crazy answers. Though it would be hilarious to see the results of that.
Yeah, exactly. I took out our home phone purely because I got sick of being rung up about polls at 6 o'clock. So it's of my own doing that I'm not on polls, but I see they're now actually phoning mobile phones.
Yep.
But I haven't been phoned yet.
Oh, well, maybe I'll pop your number into the polling companies
Won't
and
make any
say, like,
difference.
this guy's desperate to be heard.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
All right, Jack, thanks for calling into Cam's Buddies, and hopefully we'll have your son will send in another review about how fantastic you are, and I'll read it out.
Okay. Thanks, Cam. See you.
See you, bye. You can always rely on Cam's Buddies for truth bombs, and we certainly heard some more there about Te Pāti Maori. Tell us your thoughts on Cam's Buddies by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
You've heard the words open, fair, both sides of the story. It's easy to say them, but practicing them often seems like a bridge too far. New Zealand, it's time for a reality check. Reality check. RCR, Reality Check Radio. Rational discussion, common sense, and open debate for real. With me, Paul Brennan.
You know, you just can't make this stuff up. You couldn't write the script.
Veteran broadcaster Peter Williams.
Where is the evidence they actually make a difference? It turns out that was a very fair question to ask.
Taking on the mainstream, Chantel Baker.
Mainstream media, as usual, in their little perch.
The man who cares so much and whose background is for real, Rodney Hyde.
The doctors don't believe them. They can't get ACC. They can't work. They're told it's all in their head.
Along with a raft of contributors to inform, entertain, and bring the truth back to New Zealand media. It's time for a reality check, all right. RCR, Reality Check Radio at www.realitycheck.radio. We've arrived.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.
And now it's time for the whale bag. Some general feedback from Facebook. I had Bryce say, great guest, Cam, and Robin say, brilliant, thanks, Cam. Now, about my monologue last week, got a wonderfully long email from my best mate, Mike from Foxton. So here we go. Hi, Cam. Just got the opportunity to listen to the first 15 minutes of your show, and the introduction was so good. If we can't learn to do it right through the lessons of the past, we surely are doomed to repeat it. The more I think about it, the Western societies of the world have become countries of litigation and high tech. And I'm not so afraid of name-calling and the threats from these so-called authorities. What scares me is the way they enforce these so-called laws that they've imposed on us. Look at the way police treated you and Rachel Stewart. The police are a law unto themselves and only act on what they're told to do by their overlords, not the actual law. They use the ignorance of the people to scare them into doing what they see fit and then lie about what happened with the backup of their corrupt colleagues. And then what they state in court is presumed to be the truth because the police don't lie. Yeah, right. With the judiciary we have, it seems like we are fighting a losing battle, especially when all the courts have ruled on a specific matter. e.g. the Mike Smith case. And then the leftist judges in the Supreme Court moved the law sideways to allow activists to damage our society with bogus claims. All this was dealt with the lower court system that has served this country for decades. I know it's not perfect, but it was the best that we had for a long time. And before this communist BS started to be taught in our universities. It's interesting again that the globalist lawyers are keeping an eye on how things go here with the Mike Smith trial to see if they can move their laws to suit themselves once they've had the result here. And yes, it looks as though Maori wonderfulness and communism is what is going to determine our laws. So if you don't identify as Maori, you will be, as usual, a racist or a colonial rapist of the Maori culture. I am neither of those things, but after listening to Di Landy at the Inflection Point seminar in Wellington several weeks ago, I now have a better understanding of what true and honest Maori would like to see. Tea Party Maori need to drop their racist views and listen to an honest perspective on how Maori should approach the situation we now have in New Zealand regarding all their issues. Di's perspective is fair and very understandable for a white 60-plus cis male like me, and I'm sure most rational thinkers would feel the same. Wow, really gone off topic here, but we are being ruled by people who have no regard for history and are now so worried about losing their power, they're willing to sell us out for a few dollars and the opportunity to not be called a racist, but appear inclusive. Oh my God, will it take a civil war, or even another world war, to bring reason back to us all? And Mike also writes in about my interview with Catherine Ennis-Carter. Hi, Cam. Well, I set the alarm to make sure I got your show on time, but still got waylaid. Not to worry, I'll catch up with the first 15 minutes later this weekend. I can't believe it. You seem to lift the bar each time I listen, and wow, you sure did it this week with the wonderful Catherine Ennis-Carter. I have so much respect for her, having lived the government experience worldwide and being a leader in her roles doing so. But also having lived experience in the Middle East and able to explain the experience in such understandable terms for dummies like me. Mike, I don't think you're a dummy. Then you go and bring in the very best commentator on international politics, probably in the world, let alone New Zealand, the amazing Olivia Pearson. I could listen to those debates and commentaries all day, and the beauty of it is the amount of truth and knowledge I gain. An absolute coup getting Olivia to give her perspective on any subject. I would hope if she can do it next week that we can get her perspective on what should happen with Tea Party Maori or their probable interference in the election. I sent my opinion to Paul and he knows where I stand on this. I'm very much looking forward to the political agenda tomorrow morning. Yes, Cam, you have lifted the show again. Well done. And Paula writes and says, I just listened to the latest episode of The Crunch, and the whole episode was, as usual, superb. Catherine Ennis-Carter was outstanding yet again, but my favourite part was the announcement of Olivia's views. I'm so excited by this news. Olivia's intelligence and knowledge is something I can't get enough of. Thanks, Cam and RCR, for all that you bring us to listeners. Keep being fantastic, just like Cam. Thank you, Paula. Now, some comments about Olivia and my interview with her. Kingsley writes and says, the Democrats being dodgy does not make Trump a good candidate. He's got a lot of failures and stupidity wrapped up in a sad old package. Kennedy is seen by many as a sensible and safe option. I hope the voting Americans are thinking clearly. It would be a timely end to the two-party system. So pleased to listen to Olivia's views. Love Olivia. And thanks, Cam and Olivia. And Lily writes and says, hi, Cam. Great discussion with Catherine and Olivia. Looking forward to a fortnightly Olivia's views. Janet says, fantastic news. Love hearing Olivia's take on things, even though I'm not totally in her ballpark. Keep up the great work, you guys. And Natalie says, the announcement of Olivia's views, fabulous. Made my week. I tune in to every segment with Olivia. She's an articulate diamond in the rough. Bloody brilliant news. Keep up the good work, team. And Alan says, great news about Olivia's views. RCR goes from strength to strength. Louise sends in some comments, and she says, delighted to hear that you and Olivia will have a regular session on RCR. I no longer watch New Zealand TV news to glean or gauge any real sense of what is happening in the world, as often it is either sensation or drivel, and not much reality in between. Your session tonight has educated me on many levels regarding international relationships and conflicts, so we can begin to understand the origins of our current global conflicts, the factions who are supporting and opposing the same, and the idea of possible next steps that may indeed be taken to achieve their goals, which hopefully includes peace. Thank you so much for your attention to the detail as a way of allowing us to come up to speed and know what is really going on. Tracy emails and says, congrats, Olivia, on your new show. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts and insights. Mario says, many don't know that prior to the attack by Hamas, Netanyahu ordered troops away from the target site area. They were moved to the other side of Israel and didn't return until several hours. And also Egypt and South Africa, I think, warned Israel days before the attack. Also, Hamas was created and funded by Israel to oppose Arafat. It's a strange world. Well, Mario, I can't let those comments stand because they're not factually correct. Whilst you might think Netanyahu ordered troops away from the target site area, there was unrest in the West Bank, and it was all part of Hamas's plan to get troops away from the border area. Egypt and South Africa didn't really warn Israel in the days before the attack, and Hamas was not created and funded by Israel to oppose Arafat. Hamas didn't exist until after Arafat had died. Now we've got an anonymous comment here. It says, really looking forward to Olivia's segment with Cam on the crunch. Yay. And now a couple of comments about Cam's buddies. Simon says, hi, Cam, can't our three mighty leaders put a halt to the school meals tragic comedy show? By all means, give a healthy sandwich to the children that are obviously not getting a lunchbox from parents. But as for feeding my kids, no thanks. It will probably be crappy grub cooked in trans fat oils and Bill Gates' yummy cricket burgers. Yum. Great show, Cam. Kingsley writes and says, how about discussing a spending tax instead of an income tax or 1% transaction tax? Well, Kingsley, I'm not going to discuss something that has not been implemented anywhere in the world. If it worked, somebody would have done it, but nobody's done it, and it will never work. And we get a comment about Jack here. Love this guy, Cam. Nothing good in the budget. Jack's great. Some good truth bombs. And finally, we've got a couple of miscellaneous comments. Here's a good one, Cam. While people are struggling to get ACC claims accepted, it seems you're a shoo-in through Rongoa. And there's a link to a video there with a video from Julian Batchelor entitled Stop Co-Governance. Another comment, sadly, Winston Peters will be in the firing line of Te Pāti Māori. PM Christopher Luxon needs to step up and fast. And one final comment on Facebook on the Catherine Ennis-Carter interview from Andrew. Cam got two things wrong, unlikely. You can have ventilation and warmth without huge cost by installing a heat exchanger, and also rents are dictated by rental supply and the purchasing power of the renters. If you increase costs while other variables remain the same, average rents won't go up. Landlords will already charge the premium or the optimum for return before losing tenants. It will only increase rents on average over time if it reduces investment in rental supply. And that's the whale bag for this week.
The greatest threat to our democracy and our country is the belief that someone else will save it. RCR is on a mission to revive honest media, and now you too can help make that happen. Introducing the Foundation Members Club, the easiest way to support RCR and be rewarded for doing so. Receive exclusive benefits only for members, including your very own backstage pass to join the hosts for interactive behind-the-scenes discussions. And also our all-new daily curated news summary, RCR Bites, delivered to your email inbox every morning, keeping you on the pulse of the news that matters in just a few minutes per day. To find out more, visit realitycheck.radio/members and see how you too can join the mission that's making a difference.
That's it for The Crunch this week. Liam here had some truth bombs about the media and them letting Chloe Swilbrook off the hook about her claim that she's a reluctant politician. The truth is that she sought public office at every step since becoming an adult, and she's far from reluctant. His comment about a Maori parliament was interesting too, and it's given me something to think about. Meanwhile, I thoroughly enjoyed talking with Malcolm Roberts, a straight-talking, evidence-based politician who cares for his country. If only we had a few like that here. But this is what Reality Check Radio is all about. It's why we exist. So we can share these interesting characters with you all and have difficult discussions and not shy away from them. You can keep up with all my shows and indeed all of the shows from our multi-talented hosts by using the RCR app, and you can even use the app to stream live. And a big thanks to the team that helped put together this show and make it all work. It's been a real pleasure having you all back this week. I'm loving all your feedback and really enjoy talking to so many people sharing their thoughts on politics, life, and everything in between. So a big shout out to all of you. Thank you for listening and having faith in me as we continue to explore this beautiful game of politics together. Don't forget email suggestions to inbox@realitycheck.radio for people for me to interview, and let's make this show the best political show in New Zealand. Stay tuned for a repeat of Rodney Hyde's Real Talk coming up next, followed by a replay of Truth Speaker with Tobias Tahi. Looking forward to having you join me again next week for The Crunch with Cam Slater.
You've been listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater. Remember, you can check out the replays for today's show on our website at www.realitycheck.radio/replays. Tune in every Thursday at 4 p.m. for more with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.